first essay was into a cafe with chairs going flying. We won't ever show those images again. But after 9 months, it was changing lanes, it was accelerating, decelerating, stopping. As we moved this to the second patient, those 9 months turned into 3 minutes. The second patient was able to do this in 3 minutes. Same level of control. Within 3 weeks, he was faster than the able-bodied people in his labs with a joystick. BCI is here today. It has effect today. Take Nathan Copeland. Nathan Copeland, you'll have seen moving the prosthetic arm. He fist bumps, he handshakes Barack Obama, and he says, "Mr. President, your hands are warm." How's he able to do this? In the prosthetic hand, there's a sensor that sends a signal back into Nathan's brain, and Nathan is tetraplegic following a car accident at age 18 where he's sitting in the back of the car. That signal goes into his brain and tells him the hand he is shaking, no, the hand a prosthetic arm is shaking, is touching something warm, not cold. How phenomenal is that? And so we move from restoring function, restoring sensory motor control to people, and that's what this is, to a third example of an ALS patient in locked-in syndrome. We heard a little bit about that earlier. An individual who unfortunately was suffering ALS, it was super aggressive. They had a BCI, RBCI implanted, and he was able to talk again and communicate with his external environment. Strictly speaking, not locked in anymore. His first words are, "Move me, my ass hurts." While funny, it should give you a sense of what this individual was not able to communicate. We send an updated software. He's up until 2 o'clock in the morning communicating with his wife. At midnight, the autocorrect gets hung up on a word. The technician wakes up and says, "Hey, let's stop, let's resume tomorrow morning. We've got to recalibrate, something's broken." The wife says, "Don't you dare." That word exists. My husband and I invented that word 10 years ago when we started dating. The BCI was so accurate, it was able to replicate a word only 2 people in the world even know. So Siri, eat your heart out. This stuff has huge efficacy and it has impact today. It will get even better tomorrow, but it is here today. And so I'll finish off on the topic of export control. When you listen to all of the companies that you will hear, all fantastic technologies and fantastic individuals, ask yourself or them, where are they from? I am from Germany. I love living in this country, but if I can't do my work here, I know where I can move back to. On a second note, neuroscience research, the largest investor in neuroscience research is the US. We wouldn't be here, as lots of people have already commented, without DoD, NIH funding going into this. The second biggest investor at the moment into neuroscience research is not Europe, it is China. Everything we have done has relied heavily on Chinese citizens being here, researching and contributing to the research we do. If we threaten that, we threaten the primary position we have in the US at the moment in running this technology, and we will hand it over to other areas. I just would like you to keep that in mind as we discuss BCI, its fantastic position in the US at this stage and what it can do for mankind, but also what the role of government is to support us. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Mager. I'm the CEO of Precision Neuroscience. I want to start just by saying thank you to Commerce for assembling this extraordinary group of people. I feel very honored to be here, and also to Matt for really making this happen. So I'm going to try to make 4 points in this talk. First, talk a little bit about the company that I'm the co-founder and CEO of, Precision Neuroscience. We are a medical device company. 2, talk about why we're doing what we're doing, which is, really to serve as a medical aid for people with severe neurological disorders with any potential sort of long-term applications in defense, not on our roadmap, short, medium, or long-term. 3, and I think this may be an underappreciated point, creating a successful company that is developing a Class 3 medical device is very, very hard, and I'll go into some of the reasons why. And finally, our hope and belief is really that the U.S. government has a very constructive role to play in ensuring that a American industry for brain-computer interfaces maintains leadership. and we view potential export controls and other kinds of restrictions at this moment as working against that and being premature. So a little bit about us as a company. So here are a few of the disease states that our device is intended to address: traumatic brain injury, spinal cord injury, certain types of stroke, neurodegenerative diseases such as ALS. These are disease states which affect millions of Americans and for which today there is virtually no therapy in most cases, beyond really physical therapy. And that's really a scary thought when you think about the number of people that it affects. Our mission at Precision Neuroscience is to provide breakthrough treatments for the 1 billion people worldwide suffering from neurological illnesses. This is in our employee handbook, it's on our website, it's pasted all across our offices. Our mission is solely medical in nature. How do we do this? So Precision System is really based on two fundamental innovations. The first on the left in yellow are microfabricated arrays. It's really the building blocks of our system. These are extremely thin, so like a fifth of the width of a human hair, and sort of the consistency of a piece of Scotch tape. And each of these electrodes has 1,024, each of these arrays has 1,024 electrodes on it. These sit on the surface of the brain without penetrating brain tissue and without doing any damage to brain tissue. And they can be arranged in a modular fashion. Here it's presented horizontally. They can also be stacked vertically so that you can get thousands of electrodes onto the brain at any one time. And finally, these are designed to be reversible. On the right, you see a minimally invasive insertion technique, which is innovated and patented at Precision. And this really involves creating a sub-millimeter incision, very, very, very thin incision in the skin and in the skull, and sliding the electrode arrays through the slit, sort of like a letter through a letterbox. And this enables cortical surface arrays to be delivered minimally invasively. This is a rendering of our system. The orange-yellow thing is the electrode array. It's easy to see the larger electrodes, the black dots, which are 380 microns, which are optimized for stimulation. What's hard to see is the 1,000 some odd 50 micron electrodes, which are virtually imperceptible to the human eye, but which are on the array. The array then connects to an electronics package that includes custom microelectronics, including an ASIC, power, and wireless telemetry that then sends signals to a computer that operates a computer algorithm which is proprietary. A little bit about our team, but the point of showing the system and our team is that this is really an interdisciplinary endeavor, developing a brain-computer interface. It involves multiple different disciplines, from mechanical engineering to electrical engineering, microfabrication, ASIC design, and you really need to draw together world-class expertise in all of these disparate areas in order to develop an integrated system. We've had the privilege of employing people, all of whom are based in the United States, but who hail from 6 different countries. In order to attract and retain the world-class talent that developing a functional brain-computer interface requires, it really takes looking internationally at the best and brightest globally. Devices like ours will change lives. Why are we doing what we're doing? This is a sample of a few of the more than 60 quotes that we've received at Precision Neuroscience, and I'm sure the other companies that are presenting have received similar comments from some of the people for whom this technology could be a massive transformation. I'm going to read them quickly. I'm a C6 incomplete quadriplegic. I have a son. He's almost 11 years old, and I would love to get out of this wheelchair and into his life. There's nothing I wouldn't do to get my independence back. I am 25 years old. I was in a car wreck. I suffered a spinal cord injury. I would desperately love to be a part of this trial. The things I miss most are bartending and walking in the woods with my dogs. I have fought so hard to get to where I am, and I assure you that I will do whatever needs to be done to make this work. I'm a 29-year-old quadriplegic. I was injured in an accident in 2016, leaving me a C5 complete quad. I would love to participate in your program. These are comments, just a few representative ones from people, often young, many of whom are veterans, who would benefit enormously from brain-computer interface technology such as ours. This is sort of a schematic of where we believe the state of implantable brain-computer interfaces is today and where it may develop in the future. Today, we are very much, we and all the other companies that are presenting, are very much filling medical necessity. That is our use case. Over time, there is the potential, not the certainty, but the potential to augment able-bodied people and also potentially for military uses. We view those as very long-term endeavors. You know, medical necessity is where the industry has been for the 15+ years since this technology was validated in the academy by some of the people in this room, and it is very much where it remains so today. So creating a successful company in this space is very hard. This is not like starting a software company where with minimal capital you can scale quickly and commercialize. Why is that? Well, here's a sort of rough timeline of some of the critical components that are involved in developing a Class 3 medical device. First, you have to do R&D on the system. When it's ready, you can take it to the FDA and take it through the FDA regulatory process for an implantable, a chronic implantable system such as ours. That involves a PMA. That is a multi-year process. And assuming success, you are then able to market your device. But that does not mean that you can get paid for your device. In fact, you then need often to generate new CPT codes, especially for a novel system. You also have to convince CMS and private insurance companies to pay. Some of this can be done consecutively. Most of it has to be done serially. And in a best case scenario, you're still talking about a decade plus of time from start in order to generate your first meaningful revenue. Each of these stages is fraught with risk, significant risk of failure, and it doesn't cost tens of millions of dollars to traverse this decade-plus path. It costs hundreds of millions of dollars. And so it's no surprise that there are not that many companies who have done that successfully. Over the past 40 years, we've had 20 companies that have successfully cleared PMAs in the neurotech space. That's one every other year. Only 12 of them have been startup companies. It's probably not surprising, given the capital intensity, given the time frames that we're talking about. But the fact is that all of the companies that are presenting today face very long odds, and those odds are long without additional constraints on our behavior. Our view is that the US government has a constructive role to play in this industry. This is in the context of federal funding declining pretty consistently over the past several decades, which is not the case in other countries such as China, where brain-computer interface technology are explicitly called out as a strategic technology in both the current and the previous 5-year plan. And it's benefiting certain Chinese companies. Here's one called NeuroXS, also called Brain Tiger Technologies, that received $40 million of funding, including from Sequoia, one of the preeminent venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. Export controls would limit the ability of American companies to do some critical things. One is hire specialized talent from overseas, which I've described has been critical for us in our development. 2 is access global capital, which is not a constraint that other companies face in other jurisdictions. And 3 is access global supply chains and critical manufacturing techniques. I'll do 2 more slides and I'm done. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to put technical.
About 30 seconds.
Is that my 30 seconds?
Yeah, no, it won't cut into your 30 seconds, Tom. We're trying to make sure that the virtual audience, sorry that you haven't been able to see the slides. I know you've been able to hear the speakers, but we're getting that fixed right now. And it's done. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. Is this working? This one? Okay. Great to be here. Very incredible history behind all the people in this room. Never been with all of this, our colleagues before, so I'm very excited to be here. My name's Tom. I'm the CEO of Synchron. We have a slightly different approach with our technology. We've accessing the brain through the blood vessels. My background is as I did internal medicine, then neurology residency, then a PhD in stroke medicine, and I came to the US to learn how to do endovascular neurosurgical procedures. But my history was around 10 years ago, meeting Lee Hochberg, actually, around this year when this photo was taken, and I was starting to get very interested in the blood vessels into the brain. You saw the image presented by Jen around Kathy, who was a patient who sustained a brainstem stroke. I heard about the technology at that point in time when BlackRock and the BrainGate team were demonstrating proof of principle. And I went home and I started my neurology residency, and I experienced this firsthand. And I looked after a patient who was 42 who sustained a brainstem stroke. It's that tiny little black region, but took down the whole ability to get information out of the brain. And we palliated him because there was no treatment. He had a family of 3, had talked to him with his eyes, yes and no, and he decided he didn't want to live like that. So he was palliated. And so that was an early formative experience for me in understanding the medical need for this patient population. So that is the need. So we are a company building a technology that treats people who have suffered with severe paralysis. And there's many people due to a range of conditions that are living life with an inability to move their body in various domains, and there are different types of problems that cause that. And we're really diving in on what is the problem from the patient's perspective, and BCI is now a very broad, big term, and we're really trying to zero in on what is the need that can be met with this technology. I think that's one broad comment I'd make in this group, is that we're still very early, and as all of these technologies mature and go to FDA and then go to Medicare for payment, we're dealing with very particular problems in a particular part of the brain. And the issues that we've homed in on are around autonomy and functional independence, and what CMS care mostly about the ability to access healthcare to improve health outcomes. And so you and I, able-bodied people, take for granted our ability to remain connected to the digital world. It's how we engage now. And we take things for granted, that we can access it 24 hours a day, that it's simple to use, that there's no delay in turning your system on, that there's no calibration time, that you don't need help from anyone to access those systems. So these are some really fundamental, basic things that need to be solved as the technology moves from the academic into the commercial domain. So just to quickly describe, how we think about BCI, you've got the brain sending out the signal or the intent to move. And then you've got that signal coming out of the brain through the spinal cord to the muscles, and there are various conditions that can stop that, ultimately engaging with some digital form of technology that lets you engage with the world. And the concept with the BCI is that you can digitally take that information out of the brain and then wirelessly engage in a platform. So our system is a bit simpler than the other technologies that are in development, and we've purposely going down a simple approach. We've built electrodes onto a stent that sits in a blood that sits on top of the same areas in the brain that you've seen, and that comes down through a blood vessel and all remains implanted inside the body. So we're building an endovascular or minimally invasive brain-computer interface at scale, where we're unlocking the ability to control digital devices for people who have disability. We now have a team of 55 people. We're based in New York City. We have a subsidiary in Australia where we conducted our first in-human study. And we've just completed our Series C round of financing with prominent US-based venture capital groups. And my fundraising journey over a 10-year period, there is huge amounts of capital now coming into this space, which is very exciting. And you're seeing the benefits, or the benefits around commercialization happening with this group. But just to reinforce, this is on the back of 50 years of US government funding that's gotten us to this point of maturity in the industry. So our first system, our MVP, is a neuroprosthesis, which I view as synonymous with the BCI, that enables hands-free control of devices using Bluetooth, designed for people who can no longer use their hands to control devices. And we're starting to think about and formally assess how we can measure efficacy with these patient populations and things that matter around health outcomes. So the system, how am I doing, Karen? What have I got, like 5 minutes? Okay. So there's the device sitting in the blood vessel in the motor cortex. It comes out of the veins, not the arteries. We're remaining in the veins at the moment. This is our first patient in Australia. You can see the maybe you can't see, but there's a lead sitting inside the blood vessel that comes down here. I'll just play that again. So this is an angiogram of our first patient showing the blood flowing around the device. So this actually looks like a pacemaker, very similar materials and device, but it's going up into the brain. So there's no craniotomy. So we don't, with our first product offering, the channel count we've chosen is lower, and we've really focused on safety to make sure that as we learn a lot about going into the commercial domain, we've solved a lot of the issues before we start to scale up our number of electrodes into the brain. This is Philip, our patient. We have 7 patients now implanted with our technology. This is our second patient. I just want to frame how we're thinking about the way that we classify the brain states. What you're about to see is the first session he turned on the system, and we've found the simplest and robust way to classify brain states is into discrete outputs. So think of buttons or switches, and then kind of like on a PlayStation controller, and we start to convert. That forms the basis for our software engagement with digital technologies, but the building blocks are classifying brain states into switches. So he has, you're going to see a combination of eye tracking as well as our switch-based approach to modify the eye tracking movement around the screen with a different array of buttons. But you'll see his reaction here when he starts to feel what it's like to start to engage with a digital system. I don't know if sound is working, and this mouse has also stopped working. Here we go.
You see that file, there's any old file, try and share it and think about it.
So he's got a click and he's got a zoom, and the zoom function solves a big problem with eye tracking, which is around I'm going to skip ahead. So he progressed from here. There's his wife. Two minutes. Okay, so we started with eye tracking. You know, this is not so we move on. This is another patient who can't use eye tracking, and we've building out software systems that utilize this switch-based outputs in functions. You can see WhatsApp there, and the next video shows a subsequent patient now starting to use an iPhone. So I can't make that play. Karen's about to kick me off. So here he is. So here is a patient using the switch-based approach into an iPhone, doing a pain. So he's opened up an app, and he's going to start producing a report that generates a output, a pain symptom suffering. Playing at the same time. So built this approach to be able to navigate its way through the iPhone and start to select different. So this is a very focused medical need, which is what we're doing in our clinical studies. Going here. It's been a long journey, 1 minute. So the first in-human study was performed in Australia. 2019, our first patient was enrolled. We published that in JAMA. I'll get to that in a minute. The COMMAND study is our feasibility study running now, and we're building towards a pivotal study. And you know, all the things Michael just said about the long journey to a class 3 is relevant, true, but we're very focused, and every company is going to be very focused on the patient need, what you can deliver with the technology and how it improves health outcomes. And so we just had our JAMA first in human study published in JAMA Neurology. We're using these features to progress our conversation with FDA and CMS around, you know, the outcomes needed to successfully commercialize the technology. Just to leave you, this is Phil's interview with The Economist, where he made mention of the fact that this type of technology helps him continue to work. And I think that's where the technology goes just beyond health outcomes to actually a return to work, which can be a hugely impactful economic outcome with the technology. Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is DJ Saw. I'm one of the members of the founding team at Neuralink, and I currently serve as the company's VP of engineering. First and foremost, I do want to thank Matt and Betty for organizing this wonderful event for us to have an open dialogue with Department of Commerce and respective colleagues at the company. I think we've already heard kind of wonderful backgrounds on state of our technologies from Lee and rest of my colleagues, so I'll try to keep this as brief. I think also uniquely for Neuralink, we hold a lot of our, we share quite a bit of details of our technologies through, on average, a yearly events that are publicly available. So I'll try to be very brief about kind of talking about our mission, our technology, current state of things, and then where we're headed. So as others have mentioned, in Neuralink, our #1 goal, and this is our mission statement, which is to solve important brain and spine problems with the seamlessly implanted devices. And the reality is that almost everyone will develop some sort of debilitating neurological problems over time, and many of which are quite debilitating. And I think currently the set of therapies that are available have issues related to #1. For a lot of these, there actually are not cures that are available. And #2, they can be prohibitively expensive. And #3, a lot of times they may have severe adverse events and severe complications. So at Neuralink, we believe that the most reliable and affordable way to solve these neurological problem is with a device that can directly interface with the brain and the central nervous system. And as a result, we work on an implantable technology, and I think as others have mentioned, I think it's a more appropriate term than an invasive technology. And obviously, our goal is to reduce the surgical risk over time as the tech develops. And then, while we hope to build our technology will eventually lay the foundation for solving a lot of these conditions that are listed on the slide and many more. We currently focus on 3 key indications. Our primary short-term goal is to focus on helping people with tetraplegia regain their digital control of their phone, computers, and their devices. And we do so by implanting our device, which we'll talk about briefly later in the slides, in the motor region of the cortex, and basically record motor intent of arm and hand movements and translating them to a set of signals to move cursors on a screen. This is, again, just to be very clear, our first and primary indication and focus of the company. And our second indication, which represents a longer term ambition, is to restore ability to see for someone who's blind. And what we imagine this to look like is sort of an image on the right here, where if you could, for a second, imagine having sort of a camera that would capture a realistic scene, and set of those will be processed and converted to a set of electrical stimulation that may be delivered to visual cortex. It would create kind of the image that you would see on the right. And what's important to highlight here is that it will be a while until we're actually able to create a visual percept that's back to baseline, or something that you would experience without any sort of ailments. But we hope that obviously having these sort of technology that would enable someone to navigate their world is something that would be feasible in the short term. Our third indication is also a long-term ambition, and it aims to restore motor function. So the idea here is to have not just a device on the in the cortex, but having another device in the spinal cord below the site of the injury, and you will be able to sort of send and have direct connection from the device in the brain to device in a spinal cord, basically bypassing any injury that may happen in the biological, and be able to sort of send motor intent directly to implant in the spinal cord that may actually activate muscle functions for regaining motor functionality. You've heard about sort of potential impact that this technology can have. There are, in the US alone, millions of Americans who currently live with these conditions, as well as uncorrectable vision impairment. And we hope that the technology that we're building should be, it could potentially help these millions of Americans. And obviously globally, there's over hundreds of millions of patients that could, I think, benefit from this technology. And one of the major goal of Neuralink, and as you've heard from other companies, is to really ensure that this technology is as accessible and affordable to as many people as possible, because the main goal of our whole industry is to really help those are in need. So as I mentioned, we are pretty open about sharing our technical details, and there are a number of technologies that we're working on, but I think for the purpose of this crowd and this presentation, I wanted to focus briefly on our implant, which is going to be directly interfacing with the brain. And briefly, our current implant is a quarter-sized device with flexible electrodes that are capable of sensing signals from the brain and modulating neural networks with electrical impulses. And this implant will replace a piece of skull. And we work very hard to keep it and make it very small, such that they will be imperceptible after the hair is grown after the surgery. And we've also designed it to be wireless and usable at home, which is obviously very important for the experience. Core to this device is its ability to decode neural signals, as kind of Lee mentioned, which is a big component of BCI technology. And this involves really sensing action potentials or electrical signals from the brain, and then actually converting those motor intents to a set of cursor control in this particular instance. Just briefly, one of the ways that we measure the performance of our device is in terms of bits per second, which essentially is an indication of how accurate and fast our decoding process is. And just briefly on the right, in 2022, Neuralink achieved over 7 bits per second. And it's worth clarifying that these are data with monkeys, not in humans. So this we achieved in 2022, 7 bits per second with our neural decoder. And just to kind of have a point of reference, a year ago, this is what 3 bits per second would look like. So there's been tremendous amount of progress that we made, but really at the end of the day, if you were to kind of map this to a set of useful tasks, say typing on a screen, because moving cursors with these games would be similar to having a keyboard that's laid for typing. This will translate to less than 20 words per minute. And obviously our goals in the coming years is to continue improving our device decoder and the typing interface to go above 25 words per minute. I think the final thing that I want to close this presentation with is, our goals really around BCI performance and other development priorities are guided by our end users. And this is something that was deeply important to us from the beginning of the company. So we established Consumer Advisory Board, or CAB, which composed of people with tetraplegia and also their caregivers, as a way to involve them in early stages and really every stage of our product development. And just to share a couple anecdotes of how this has translated in terms of how we think about our product development. Several of our CAB members have mentioned that it's extremely difficult for them to do click and drag, and it's an important functionality that is often needed for controlling apps like Words or Excel or what have you, and where a lot of times voice control is inadequate. So that led us to focusing on click and drag as one of the functionalities that we're focusing on. And one other quick anecdote that I want to share is another CAB member also mentioned that they're really in need of using creative tools for drawing and for editing photos, videos, and mixing audios, but it's painstakingly difficult to do that with assistive technology that are out there. So one of the things that we're obviously doing with that is to investigate able body cursor control and working towards having the same level of accuracy with BCI. So, we plan to really continue partnering closely with our CAB members to really engage with them, build meaningful relationships, and ensure that our product meets diverse needs of this community, not only from a functional perspective, but also an ethical one. Thank you.
Okay, great job, and thanks for the tough task of summarizing some really complicated data in 10 minutes and complicated aspirations and state of the art. So at this time, we have about 12 minutes, I think, for a Q&A. So I will ask if people in the room would like to ask a question, feel free to line up after the microphone, or was there a microphone there anymore? Oh, someone is, okay, it's being held, so they can bring it to you, but it's better if you line up there. And also, Betty, I don't know if any virtual participants have submitted questions at this time. Okay. Any questions from the floor? Okay. Please state your name and affiliation. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. My name is Stacey Ellieu. I'm Vice President of Regulatory and Quality at NeuroPace, and we are a commercial company. So we have been through that valley of death. We're still in the valley of death. We got our first approval or indication through the FDA. We submitted in July of 2010, and it took us until November of 2013 to get an approval for an epilepsy indication. My question to those on the panel is specifically related to looking at export controls and the impact that that would have on scalability as a commercial company. So perhaps Michael and Magnus could speak to this. Magnus, you get your 2 minutes back. Specifically on what it would look like for you for manufacturing and what it would look like for you for expanded or extended indications.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that's almost exactly what my next 2 slides were on. So I'm going to get a little bit back. I think, manufacturing, the supply chain right now, we're all using quite sophisticated manufacturing technology. For us, we're using MEMS technology to make our arrays. Right now, 90% of MEMS capacity is either overseas or it's in the US, but owned by foreign companies. So, for us, we're doing everything we can to maintain a domestic supply chain. But if increased limitations are placed on the industry before we have a chance to expand capacity of some of these sort of critical bottlenecks, I think it will make our jobs even harder to commercialize this technology. Thank you for asking that question.
Does anybody else on the panel want to respond? Yes, go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, it's been critical for BlackRock from the outset to not just design the next innovation that is cool and excites investors, but to ensure that we design something to COGS. And that means from the outset figuring out how we're going to manufacture it and how we will deliver it, not just in tens and hundreds when we deal with research environments, but then thousands, 10,000s, and even more when we want to roll this out to a substantial patient population. In our most recent electrode endeavor, that meant we had to base it off CMOS processes. And just like you talked a moment ago, MEMS processes. It's relying on those kind of level of things that will be really the only way from our perspective that we can produce these things at COGS levels of dollars or be able to produce them at volumes that are meaningful. And as you just pointed out, those are not exclusive to the US. And while I appreciate efforts going into chips and various other strategies at the moment, and they are critical, absolutely critical, it would hamper a nascent industry. It would break its neck, quite frankly, if we were not able to access these levels of production sites, right? How cool would it be if you could create any of the electrodes we just talked about that are phenomenally difficult to create on the back end of a mobile phone production process that runs at millions? That would give you the ability to access patient populations and provide technology at affordable costs. If this stuff relies on your benchtop mine in Utah or yours in Texas, we're not going to manage. So from that perspective alone, a lot more needs to be done, and really appreciate some of the efforts out there at the moment.
Thank you, Marcus. Did you want, Matt? You look like you have something you could add.
Yeah, I think the CHIPS Act is a good example. I mean, there's a role that like the Commerce Department could have here that's proactive and positive and trying to get, you know, a little more carrot for the industry, maybe not, and maybe a little less stick. The other thing, and actually talking about NeuroPace, something that Frank Fisher, who was the founding CEO or was the CEO of NeuroPace for a long time, said to me once was, it's all about people. And with respect to export control and deemed export, like anything that would keep the best people in the world from coming here to the United States and working on these problems would be a terrible idea. So I think we definitely want to make sure that a lot of the best people, I mean, some of the people at this table, you know, Tom, Marcus, you know, Ben, I mean, not born in the United States, but like if they didn't come here, we wouldn't have this industry that we have right now. And it's super important to recognize that, like, people not born in the US built this industry. So we definitely want more people coming in. We don't want any impediment whatsoever to the best people coming.
Great, thank you, Matt.
One other comment that I'll quickly make about manufacturing. I think it's often easy to think about manufacturing from kind of the perspective of the manufacturer, like the first degree manufacturer, but there's also second, third, and fourth degree, you know, equipment suppliers, material suppliers, and other degrees of kind of contribution to enabling the technology and manufacturing of our work that we're doing. So I think it's important to kind of consider what the impact that could have on the whole industry as well.
Thank you, DJ. It looks like we have some questions in person. Can you say your name and affiliation?
Sure. My name is Shalina Lalji with ALS Heroes. My husband has ALS. I'd like to make a comment and then ask a question to the panel. The comment is, not to sound overdramatic, but what we're talking about today in this room is not just a quality of life issue for conditions like ALS, but in some aspects a life or death issue. If you think about it, almost every ALS patient will get to the point of choosing to trach or not to trach. In this country, unfortunately, that percentage of people that choose to trach is anywhere between 10 to 15%. In other countries, such as Japan, it's nearly 100%. So let's think about that for just a second. That is life or death. Why are people choosing to not live versus choosing to do so in other countries? Number one, it's the cost of living. Some people, unfortunately, just simply cannot afford to live, which is more than tragic. An average ALS patient requires $250,000 out-of-pocket expenses to survive because of 24/7 care. So why is it that, so there's the other issue. The other issue is quality of life. And a lot of people choose not to live because of the lack of quality of life, and this is what you all are providing to ALS patients and other neurological diseases and neurological injuries. My question to you is as follows. Well, first of all, I'd like to say we truly appreciate all the work that every single person in this room is doing, as well as all the work that the government has done for the last 5 decades to bring us to this point. So my question is, what can patients, families, patient advocacy groups do to help you all continue to charge forward so that more patients choose life?
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very moving and very pertinent comment. In Australia, it's almost 0%, maybe 0.5% of people choose to get a tracheostomy. I didn't know it was so high in Japan. I thought it was actually higher in the US, but I think the most important thing that you could do as advocacy is, you know, the FDA is here, David and Heather and Julie are here. I don't think CMS is here, but they're the two bodies that are they're critical pieces in carrying this forward. We're obviously here for export control, and that's very important. But from my perspective, getting to a mature stage of looking at a pivotal study, which is the final step before going to commercial and getting pre-marketing approval from the FDA, you have to solve the problem of what problem are you going to solve, and how does it generate healthcare outcomes. And that's not an obvious answer. FDA is here because the answer is not obvious. And CMS, when we have conversations with them, it's not obvious how we do that, and that we don't have the tools yet. We are making up those tools as we go. We don't have those tools to make those assessments right now. And what I'm seeing is our engagement with advocacy, but also engagement with advocacy to FDA and to CMS, and playing a education role around what the needs are, I think would be extremely helpful. So helping understand the need and how the technology serves that need is not a solved problem, and we need help.
Thank you. Go ahead to the next question.
Rob Franklin from BlackRock Darnotech. So the government has a role to play according to the Constitution in promoting the general welfare and helping our people, as well as establishing justice. What are the things that government could do to be more collaborative with private industries and to help out the private industries in this area and to help speed along innovation and bring these technologies out to people?
I can throw out two quick things, both of which have been touched on just now. To Tom's point about CMS, we require as an industry rates of reimbursement that justify all of the capital that is going to go into developing these devices. And I think making the bridge between FDA approval and CMS reimbursement clearer, stronger, and shorter is something that's been attempted in the past through the sort of breakthrough device designation, but not with adequate funding. And I think ultimately that has the potential to delay the commercialization of this technology, and I think is an important issue. And second, I think again we've sort of touched on sort of CHIPS Act funding and other other similar forms of incentives and grants from the government. I think if we're going to develop a next generation medical device manufacturing capacity in the United States, the government absolutely has a role to play in helping facilitate that, just as we're bringing sort of chip manufacturing onshore.
Great. Yes, Marcus.
Just one briefly as well. At another level, I'd like to point your attention at the 30,000 square foot to a slide I think you pulled up. Where was you? The number of successful medical device in neuro. I mean, that extremely short list, and we're talking a list that is the result of several multi-billion-dollar companies like Medtronic, like Abbott, and then on top of it, some startups. Just recreate that list again in your mind. How small was that? And we've got 600 million, or I think you said $1 billion, suffering from neurological disorders in the world. That healthcare cost is crippling us, and it is going to cripple us every single day of the week more, and not just in developed countries, but elsewhere too, as neurological disorders are very often intrinsically linked with aging. So this problem is only going to get bigger. If for a moment at the big level we can't quite get agreement with all the insurance providers and the way medical health care is set up in this country or other countries, fine. Then at least give us the chance to prove it with patient populations that today have no other choice. Yeah. For the life of me, I cannot understand how as a society, with all of these entities together, all here right now, cannot find a solution for those patient populations that have no other choice. There is no alternative, no alternative for an ALS patient. There's no medication they can take. There's no existing industry we will pull down. There is no existing FDA regulatory process that we would put in question. Okay. So even if we are cautious about the bigger picture, and I appreciate why, can we focus on pioneering pathways that we can go down with this technology and the advocacy groups and everybody in support?
Thank you, Marcus. Great points. And David, we're going to be pointing to you later. Last question.
So I just want to say that the technology that you all are developing is really incredible, and I probably speak for the room when I say thank you for doing what you're doing, and it's amazing to see you guys all together on one panel talking about the really pioneering work that you've been doing. So my question is, touching upon something that Michael said, so you mentioned that it would be premature to think about military uses or other uses now, and I do agree with you, and I'm going to throw a really tough question that I don't have the answer to either. But if it's too premature now, right, when do we think is the right time to start thinking about potential uses beyond medical applications? Because then there should be a time when we should start thinking about this. And are any of you having those conversations in your companies now?
Thank you, Anna. You start talking so you can give it.
So I couldn't possibly comment.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is, I think later. I think, no, it is a tough question. And I think, ultimately, obviously there's a fair amount of subjectivity. I should have said, we do think at some point it will be appropriate to regulate this industry in a different way with export controls in mind. I don't think that it's an unreasonable consideration. I just think if you look at, sub 40 patients implanted, and this is for implanted systems specifically, I can't speak to non-invasive, but for invasive systems with fewer than 40 people, the functionality that they've been able to achieve is impressive, but still at a pretty early stage. Let's have this industry develop, and let's see it touch more lives and see where it goes before clamping down from a regulatory perspective.
The other thing is, let China dump money into a brain-controlled jet plane, because that's a dumb idea. Like, we can't even use EEG to control like a crappy drone. And frankly, like the aviation industry is moving away from people controlling jet planes. Like, so I think like they're like, just because it was in a sci-fi movie doesn't mean that it's a military threat. Like, we should actually, before we make any rules, bring someone in who like really knows that stuff and make sure it's a real thing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna. Great question. I think that's a good question to carry over into the next group as well. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. So go ahead and get up. I don't know if there's still coffee back there or it's cold coffee, but there's probably something good back there. And then we'll see you back in about 10 minutes for the second half of speakers. Thank you.
Take a picture when not everybody's looking and we're at each other.
Well, I've already been accused of like the individual shots that I got, like not being the most flattering. So I apologize in advance.
You should bring Carolina up too.
Yeah, do we?
Hey, Carolina.
Yeah, put somebody attractive into the picture. The men's club.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, but just come up, because you, yeah. Okay, we do a separate one without you, but I just felt like if you were there like 10 feet from us, we should bring you.
Thank you. I'll let you know when I know.
I've got two questions. I'm Tim Curtin. I'm the director of the Chemical and Biological Controls Division here. And first question is,
Yes.
Having to update some slides that people want to change, so I was maybe let's wait to give the 3 minutes of warning until she's done that.
Well, Erica can get started at 2, right?
Sure, she's having to update some.
Oh, so she's going to do it after all.
Just got to do hers.
Oh, I thought she said she wasn't going to do it. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I have you. Thank you for. So I think we're going to just have you all sit up there whenever. Okay, we're nearing the end of our break, so we're entering into the second section of speakers on BCI commercialization. Can the following people please come up to the front table? Erica Ross, Carolina Aguilar, Chris Ulrich, Ramses Alcade, and then, yeah, the last 2 are virtual. I think Anna and Brian are waiting in the wings virtually. So we're about to get started, so please get back to your seat. We're trying to get you out of here on time, keep us on track. Okay, we're about to get started. So we will have the following people: Erica Ross, Carolina Aguilar, Chris Ulrich, Ramsey Alcade, or Al-Said, not sure how you say it. Okay, and then Anna Micas and Brian Pepin will be joining us virtually. So Erica, can you get us kicked off?
Thank you, everybody, for your attention. This is such an incredible group of people and conference in general. I think I can't remember the last time I went to a conference and it was kicked off with advocates and experienced users like that. So it's pretty incredible to have the community of folks that we're all here trying to serve starting this conference, and Ian and Jen and Zoe, just really appreciate the way you guys are here to advocate for everybody across the board who are trying to help here. So my name's Erica Ross. I'm the Ross Ellison. That's new. I'm the vice president of clinical and regulatory at Onward, which is also new. I joined Onward about 3 weeks ago. So I'm here presenting on behalf of the over 100 folks who have been involved with Onward, who are employees at Onward, and have been with Onward for more than 3 weeks. So bear with me today. So Onward was founded in 2015. It's actually based out of the Netherlands. We have locations in the Netherlands, in Lausanne, Switzerland, and in Boston. So we are a multinational company. We actually have 20 nations represented in our 100 employees. So it's a pretty cool international group of folks. We have a lot of clinical work going on in the US as well as in Europe, and a lot of technologies that we've actually licensed out of US labs and out of different groups here. So a lot of crosstalk in different countries all over the world going on with our technologies. So we have 2 purpose-built investigational devices, one that's a non-invasive system to treat folks with spinal cord injury, and another that's an implant that's in the works right now. We have 7 different breakthrough applications, breakthrough designations that are targeting various symptoms related to spinal cord injury. And we've completed our first pivotal trial here in the US, moving on to our second for the implant here soon. The idea really is to focus on spinal cord injury and focus on symptoms that matter for folks who experience this or this community. So there's a lot more to, as Jen touched on earlier, there's a lot more to really focus on than movement. There's a lot more to this population in this area. It's a highly prevalent disorder. We don't give it the attention it needs across the board. So it's really an incredible, I feel very grateful to be able to completely focus on spinal cord injury in this new role. It's very prevalent and affects a lot of people. Very costly to individuals and to systems in general. So our 2 systems, we have the ARC-EX system, which is the non-invasive system to electrically stimulate the skin, really focused for upper limb mobility and control. And the ARC-IM, which is our implantable platform with a variety of different electrode configurations that are really built to target different levels within the spinal cord and trying to treat different symptoms that are really important across the board for spinal cord injury, folks with spinal cord injury. Our external platform consists of a system that will actually interface with the skin, of course, and then the digital ecosystem that goes with it. So you start thinking about brain-computer interface and where we can go with systems like this, and the continuum of symptoms that you can really target with both a non-invasive system like this as well as an implant. It gets really, really interesting for data and brain-computer interface futures. Our first indication is strength and function of the hands and arms. So this is the first indication and the first pivotal trial that was already done and completed with the multi-center trial in the US and several sites in Europe as well. The implantable platform consists of a variety of very, very specific leads that, like I said, will target different levels and focused on autonomic control, really, really important pieces that we think we can manage by having an implant in the spinal cord and this full ecosystem around it. So a way to understand what's going on in the nervous system with data from the nervous system and how that maps to measures of different symptoms. So really thinking about this full digital ecosystem that goes with the therapy itself and really moving towards this true brain-computer interface technology. With the ARC-IM system, the first indication will be improved blood pressure regulation. This was a really intentional target for Onward, knowing that about 75% of folks with spinal cord injury have issues with blood pressure regulation. Actually massively impactful for a day-to-day, somebody's day-to-day. If you think about folks who are able-bodied, and even changes in blood pressure there. You have massive changes in what you're capable of doing, how your brain functions, how your body functions. Things like movement and time that it takes to do different activities, different autonomic functions, everything is related to blood flow. So it's a really intentional first target for the implanted therapy. And we'll be starting our pivotal later this year, early next year, to really focus on understanding how we can regulate blood pressure with this system. We have some great early phase data. We had a nice pilot study that came out of Switzerland and a couple different additional centers in Europe that showed some very promising data stimulating the spinal cord with an early phase system. So the idea here is we start here, and then you understand more and more about what we can and cannot do with spinal cord stimulation for folks with spinal cord injury. The team has done a lot of work already with understanding how we can improve standing and mobility with spinal cord stimulation as well. I will say, to Jen's point earlier, there's been a lot of attention for videos like this, where you see movement, you see improvement, but we clearly have a long way to go before the way we're stimulating, how we're stimulating, the actual therapy itself is to a point where it's really going to create that autonomy that we hope these therapies will create. So this is further down our pipeline because we know that we need to focus more on building up the technologies, focus more on understanding the science and the mechanisms behind why this works before truly approaching this. So starting with an area where we really think we can advance this therapy for folks in this space, and kind of grow from there as we continue to have more people across the world using therapies like this, really understand what we are capable of doing and what we really need to improve technology-wise to get us advancing as a field. We've done a lot with different advocacy organizations, and I think that there's so much benefit to working with active users and people who can really help you identify what the unmet patient needs are, the unmet needs across the board. So onward, I'm really grateful for the work that's been done to date, and we continue to work hand in hand with folks who are advocates for these populations. And I will say, so the systems that we have today are at a point where we have the ability to capture data. We have the ability to deliver stimulation. And I think as we continue in this space and we continue understanding where we're stimulating, how to bridge these gaps, how to make sure that we're stimulating in the right places, we're capturing the right kind of data to create actionable insights and therefore titrate stimulation more and more intelligently. This is a clear flywheel for us at Onward as we are able to improve therapies going forward. And with that, I will go sit with my peers here and be happy to take questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much for involving the international community. You will hear by my Penelope Cruz accent that I'm not from here. I'm from Spain, and I represent InBrain Neuroelectronics, which is a company we decode neural signals to improve patients' lives, and is based in Barcelona, although I live in Switzerland because I worked 13 years for Medtronic. I'm a Medtronic kid, actually. Let me see if I can move this. I also appreciate a lot, Matt, that you had also some gender balance here. So happy to share a little bit with Erica here. So we always said that every leap in humanity has been linked to a key material, from Stone Age to Bronze Age to Silicon Age today, with all our chips made of this material. And we think that in neuroelectronics, actually materials, bidimensional materials like graphene, could represent that revolution. Graphene is a Nobel Prize winner material. It got the Nobel Prize in 2010, and it's the thinnest material known to man. It's an atom thick, yet it's 200 times stronger than steel, and is biocompatible and flexible. And the most important thing is this new physics that it delivers. Let me see if I can go here. Yeah. So I said, I've been in Medtronic for 13 years, and deep brain stimulation is a therapy I adore, and I've seen many, many patients being helped by it. And I love BlackRock and everything that it's doing. So these are therapies that have generally actually helped 100,000, more than 100,000 patients around the world. I still see that they are quite invasive in some sense. I mean, you have the neuromodulation system, you have the cables on the neck, you have to have these leads on the brain, and the leads, for instance, in Parkinson's disease, these contacts are big and at most 1 or 2 feet on the subthalamic nucleus, which is the size of a lentil. And of course, when you see patients, it works really well in some patients, but from patient to patient, you don't have the same results because it's just very difficult to put those 1 or 2 leads in that particular nuclei. And in many cases, the therapy, so the technology has been able to stimulate, but not really record and stimulate, so not do things in closed loop to really personalize the therapy. So that's what we are doing with graphene. So we can really miniaturize. So we have properties that are delivered by the material that allow us to go into very small sizes. It can be bidirectional, so we can record and stimulate, and is very flexible, so it conforms really well to the surface of the brain. And we can couple with modern electronics and bring other biomarkers, and thanks to the data processing, actually look at brain biomarkers for a particular patient, but also activity-based biomarkers from the Fitbit or the Apple Watch that can be integrated into that processing and actually deliver a more personalized therapy. What we are doing is actually, I mean, we've seen that the brain has been decoded nuclei by nuclei for many years, for the past 2 decades. We think that if we go circuit by circuit or network by network, we could get better results. So what we are doing is putting a brain-computer interface module on the cortex. So in this case, for Parkinson's disease, is a motor cortex, and then a subcortical interface, in this case also in the subthalamic nucleus. And what we are doing is actually looking at those pathological biomarkers, just like a glucose sensor, and understanding where the pathological biomarkers are happening. And then once they are detected, we stimulate so we can keep that patient in the highest percentage time on therapy. And if you move these interfaces to another network, you could treat epilepsy, or you could treat depression, or you could treat Alzheimer's in the future. So that's what we are doing. We are starting with Parkinson, very classical indication, but still a huge need, and 65% of the current implants, the legacy implants in this indication. So you see a little bit the difference. These are the metal traditional interfaces that you have today on the market, cortical and deep, usually low resolution, very big contacts, millimetric surfaces. And you look at graphene, and you can go to 25 micrometers and different ranges of sizes, but on the submillimeter size, recording and stimulating. And this is what we are proving. So we can reduce battery consumptions 50 to 90%, and that's why we can connect these interfaces into a very small implant in the skull. And because it delivers 200, or you can inject 200 times more charge injection at a very low impedance, that's what's driving that miniaturization. But also we can read these biomarkers at 10 times more resolution than with metal, with platinum iridium. This is just an example of our GLP sheep study that we are using for our first in human. And you can see, in the same surface where you can now fit 2 of those contacts, will be the same also subcortical. You can put, in this case, 60 contacts of graphene. And if you look at the readings that it gives you, you see the dramatic resolution of the signals that you get. That's with the metal concurrent. So you see 2 signals because only 2 contacts fit, and you see the resolution that you get with graphene. And you start, of course, having a very good map of what is happening on that somatosensory cortex area in this case where we touch the tongue of the sheep. But we start seeing that we are also looking at all the range of bands that you see on the brain. So, everybody's trying to close the loop with the beta, or everybody's looking at certain frequency bands, because platinum can detect very well those bands, but there are a lot more bands, a lot of more activity being in the brain that we cannot see with normal metal and iridium electrodes. So you see high frequency oscillations. I mean, you basically see all the frequency bands. Now we start with this technology that we have with 60 sensors, because we could scale later and because we had to de-risk a lot when it comes to graphene, but we can go up to 1,024 sensors with this other technology, and also read infrared low activity signals, so below 0.1 hertz, which is extremely difficult to identify with platinum iridium. As a result, we can see, this was a Nature paper also published, you can see this DC, so this direct current shift happening before an epilepsy seizure is actually triggering. And, stopping an epilepsy seizure here when you see it is very difficult, but seeing it before and stopping it before is very, very effective. So we now have access to all the frequency bands in the brain. I mean, maybe there's something else we don't know, but we are trying to make sense even of the bands that we don't know. And then subcortical, we are doing the same. So this was another experiment of a subcortical early interface. Now we are going to pigs and non-human primates, but you see that we can decode single unit activity. So once we are there, we can look at local field potentials. And this was a Parkinsonian model where we were able to detect a Parkinsonian pathological band and correct it by recording and stimulating it. Oops, sorry. So all that is, of course, as I said, connected to this intelligent decoding unit, and because there's so much data processing being there, we are working on a very powerful data hub that then it will give birth to the clinical data hub and the research data hub. And like all of us, we need to use machine learning and deep learning models to be able to decode these signals and to be able to produce that particular personalized therapy. It's a very experienced team of people that have been in very known companies already. So, some of these people were in Sapiens that was acquired by Medtronic. Then they went in, they were very much used in Onwards, and now they're in Brain. And as I said, it's 50 people from 14 different countries really waking up every morning and fighting for this mission. Also a very international team. And just, as I said, fighting every day to make this mission possible of restoring patients' lives. So thank you again for your attention, and we'll be speaking later.
I'm being told to wait just a second. So I'll introduce myself. I'm Chris Ulrich. I'm the CTO at Cognition. I think many of you are familiar with my CEO, Andreas Forslund. He couldn't be here today. He has to attend another event, so I'll be representing. Cool, thank you. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm Chris Ulrich. I work at Cognition, and I'm actually pretty honored to be here today because I'm relatively new to the BCI space, only about a year in, I guess is the way you would say it. However, I spent most of my career, maybe 20 plus years, working on human-machine interfaces, VR, AR, mobile phones, all kinds of stuff. And I think for me, it's really inspiring to be working in a space where I think there's an opportunity to create meaningful products, meaningful solutions that solve real actual problems for real actual people. And so, let's see, let's go. Cool. So at Cognition, our primary mission is actually focused on the ability to reproduce or to enable people to have effective communication. So we're focused on solving the problem of augmenting or enhancing the communication capabilities of something like 500 million people around the world who have various disabilities, related to speech generation. And so, of course, as we've heard multiple times today, that could be ALS. You know, through the disease progression of ALS, you lose the ability to speak. There's many other conditions for which that's also the case, in fact, with fairly sizable numbers of people in the US and around the world. And so, however, our focus in the short term, because you know, as a startup company, we need to pick a product, pick a market, focus, and deliver something specific. We're starting with a specific focus on ALS. And there's a good reason for doing this, and which I'll come to in a second. But ALS is, as we've heard, you know, multiple times today, is this horrible condition that is progressive, degenerative, and results in a decline in motor function over a period of 3 to 5 years or so, roughly speaking. And for us, when we think about the journey, if you like, of an ALS patient, it starts out with this sort of tingling at the beginning and ending at this sort of state, which is, you know, sort of hard to imagine, where you're completely locked in, and there's really no motor control, no function, nothing you can't even move your eyes. But as you go through this journey, there's multiple phases that the patient goes through, which include just slurred speech, which actually is similar to other conditions such as cerebral palsy, for example. Then they go into a phase where that may be the trach moment, where they start to lose the ability to have any meaningful speech, but they can still move their eyes or use their muscles. And then they go to a place at the sort of end state where it's clinically locked in. And so as a company that we're trying to solve the communication challenges for many conditions, we use ALS as a representation because we think we can actually create technologies that service this entire journey. And we're trying to create a single platform that actually solves the problem from slurred speech all the way to locked in. And that's really what the cognition device or headset is intended to do. And in addition to that, and I don't want to give our government friends here any concerns, but there's actually a huge other population beyond the assistive population, including all of us, who are actually situationally disabled at various points in our lives, right? And so the example I love to give is if I'm driving my car, I'm actually effectively blind relative to my touchscreen in the center console. And so that's actually an assistive technology use case, if you can imagine it, where I might be able to take solutions that we develop in this marketplace and adapt them to those other opportunities. And that, of course, is a humongous market of 8 billion people around the world. So the platform that we're building, and I'm really, it's important to understand that it's really not just a BCI platform. That's a component of our system. That's an essential element, but really the system is based on 3 key components, which are kind of hard to read here. But basically on the left-hand side of this figure, you have biosensing information. So this could include EEG, could include implantables, could include eye tracking, could include all sorts of sensing technologies that you can use that are commonly used currently for assistive devices, integrated into a multimodal input stream. That's married with the notion of context awareness. And for us, this is really a huge consideration because when you're having a conversation with someone, the person you're talking to, for example, is actually a key consideration when thinking about what speech you're going to be saying. If I'm talking to my wife, I'm going to be saying different things than when I'm talking to my physician, for example, right? And so I can actually use that knowledge to drive more efficient communication out of my device, right? I'm not going to talk to my doctor about stuff I talk to my wife about, obviously. And then the bottom portion you see here is really the language model, which is driving that system. And so we're using technologies like GPT-3, kind of large language model constructs, to be able to take a huge corpus of information, marry that with biosensing data and context information to create the concept of agency or a sense of agency for our users. And you can see that if you have, something fairly mild like a slurred speech condition, I can now take this information and give you enhancements that will allow you maybe to vocalize in a way that's easily understandable. If I'm locked in, I can now take the BCI component and I can use that to drive the system to generate language in a more meaningful and effective fashion, perhaps from nothing. But I could also use the same system to drive other things that create agency, like powered wheelchairs or devices that driving a car, for example. Right? Those are all definite opportunities, but they depend a lot on the bandwidth flows and some other details on how the system actually works. So I wanted to spend a second, because this is the Export Controls Conference, and just mention briefly that the BCI component in our current product that we're launching probably mid next year is based on visually evoked potentials, which among the neuroscientists here, you'll know exactly what I mean by that. It's basically a visual stimuli that's presented to the user. I'll give you an example in a second. The user decides what they're attending to with mental fixation, and then we're able to use an EEG sensor to sense what they're fixating their attention on. From a mind reading perspective, there's probably nothing, there's no information there effectively. I can't tell what you're thinking about, or any other information about that. All I know is that you're focusing on a stimulus. And that actually is not very efficient, frankly speaking, relative to something like eye gaze sensing or any muscle sensation, anything. This is actually fairly inefficient way to sense user intention. But if you have no other choice, then this is actually extremely effective. All right, so the platform that we're building actually is an augmented reality headset. This is the current industrial design for it. It provides mobile, it's completely self-contained computer, much like a pair of augmented reality glasses. Has brain sensing built into the back of it. It can sense position in space, time of day, it's network connected, all this kind of stuff. It's able to render in visually to people you're speaking to what you're trying to say. So it's kind of like a head-up display combined with a teleprompter that can present to other people. And it also is connected to Alexa so that you can use that for doing things that require agency, like turning on and off lights or doing other activities that you may want to do around your house. So here's an example of someone wearing it. This image on the lower left is actually the view from the user's perspective as they use the device, showing this is the head gaze driven keyboard interface. And so, for those users of ours who do have head gaze capability, like cervical muscle control, then they're able to use this system to actually select letters, but you'll see in the middle, there's predictions being presented to the user, which are words and phrases, which basically allow them to create utterances much more rapidly than they would otherwise be able to do. Like hunting and pecking single letters to create sentences is extremely inefficient. And that's really where the language model and the context comes into our system. So we've also, as I mentioned, connected this to Alexa, and then we're working right now on some projects related to mobility to use this device. So here's an example in the lower right of the BCI interface as it currently stands. One of the properties of visually evoked potentials is that they have this strobing sensation often. They don't always have to have this, but in this particular example, it's being shown with a strobing sensation. And so basically in this situation, those strobing frequencies are all slightly different. And so we're able to actually detect which frequencies the user's attending to, and then that is used to make a selection. So for someone who is 100% locked in, you can present them with this kind of interface and ask them yes/no questions and get clear answers back on what they want, what their intentions are, for example. Right, there's our neuroscientist there in the bottom center trying out the device. And then here's an example of what the phrase interface might look like if you were doing a clinical engagement. All right, so where are we in terms of building this product? So the company's been around for 9 years or so. Really started in earnest building this device about 1.5 years ago. And we've had a 80-subject IRB trial that we ran last year. It's actually still open and running. We did some early work with ALS, late-stage ALS patients, able to demonstrate efficacy of the system. Got tons of great feedback from a UX perspective, which I think is incredibly important and we should never forget. And we're using that to refine and iterate on the product right now. My last slide.
While I get my slides up, my name is Dr. Ramz Al-Kaid. I'm the CEO of Neurable. And today I'm going to be speaking more about some of the consumer applications of brain-computer interfaces and where they're going to in the near future. Most of our tech is spun out of the University of Michigan. And yeah, there's some really cool videos. So if you're, I'm the last talk for this section, so bring your attention. Oh yeah, the virtual speakers. One of them is Anna too, and she's amazing. So.
Thank you, Ramses.
All right, so there are some key problems that exist inside the brain-computer interface space. The first one is, data. We don't have a lot of data. There's a lot of incredible applications that can be done from cognitive biomarkers, for example, tracking something like Parkinson's, helping individuals communicate with silent communication, but a lot of these things are limited by data. For example, we have a biomarker for focus that we worked on with the Air Force, and it took us close to 4,000 individuals to get this to generalize to a point that you can just put it on an individual and it works. And we also have silent communication systems, which I'll be showing in a little bit, but for us to generalize them, we think we're going to need data sets of close to 40 million. Right? The next thing is they're very slow. Non-invasive devices are incredibly slow. So I want to show you a quick video here of what is considered essentially close to state-of-the-art event-related potentials. It's just a type of typing similar to the light system that you saw previously. Hopefully it'll run. Oh. Well, we'll move on. But essentially, what this really shows you is what I wanted you to do is just internally, think about how long it takes you to do something, right? And this video is just 15 seconds long, and you'd be surprised how slow 15 seconds is, And back when I was at the University of Michigan working with individuals at cerebral palsy, we had these 8-year-old kids come in, and we had to set them up with this BCI system, and it would take half an hour, and they had goop running down their face. And then on top of that, to respond to one question to a clinician, sometimes it could take them up to 1 minute to 5 minutes. And that just wasn't good enough. I take responsibility for this too, because I updated my slides while we were here, so. Nope. Yeah, we're just going to move forward. It's fine. So really, wow, that skipped a lot. Okay, so I'm going to start right here. Excellent. So the next problem that exists is that BCIs can't get to the level of data collection that you need if they look like this, right? We have these laboratory grade systems that collect incredible data, but you wouldn't wear this as an everyday device. And we're talking about getting 40 million data sets, right? So the next thing is, we also have these consumer grade systems, but most of them are just terrible quality data. You collect with them and they're really, disappointing to use, and you end up putting them inside shelves inside your drawer. And so what we really aim to do is how do we create a high performance everyday brain-computer interface system? And so this brings us to the University of Michigan, where as part of my PhD work, we worked on a new method that combined modern filtration systems. So for the most technical people here, it's called something similar to a Kalman filter with neural networks in order to increase signal to noise. And so at the top, you have what is traditional EEG data coming in, and we're looking at it with respect to frequency. And all you have to do to look at is just know that the top one is messy and the bottom one looks really clean and differentiable. And that's the key secret to what Neurable can do that no other company in the world can do. And what we've done over the past 10 years is we've said, okay, we've created this incredible way of looking at data. What if we could take these large scientific grade systems and over time reduce the number of sensors while still maintaining the same type of quality when it comes to machine learning prediction? So fast forward 10 years of research and development, 33 patents, hundreds of gigs of data. We finally got to the point that we were able to match the types of demos and applications that we could do with these large clinical grade systems with essentially a pair of headphones, earbuds, and glasses. And I actually have one of our older prototypes here with me that you can just pass along. And what you'll notice there is that there's these silver sensors around the ear cup. Now those are the ones that are actually controlling, that pick up your brain activity. And what's really important about this is that this is a device that can be scaled. It can be put inside everyday devices. right? And thus far, most brain-computer interfaces out there have these crazy kind of looking applications. You need to use this giant contraption. And this is all possible due to our team. So we're a significant amount of scientists in the Boston area. Myself, for example, like I said, I've been in this field for about 10 years. Originally developed the technology for the Neurable system, and since then, these brilliant people at Neurable have taken it on and really moved it forward. We've had about 8 published papers, including Nature, on the technology itself, and we're just starting to really get this rolled out. And so this is where I want to show you a few demos. And hopefully, nope, this one's not going to work either. But anyways, this demo here is actually something that we are going to do, that we did right now with the US Air Force. So you'll see that there's this red bar. And that red bar can actually track an individual's focus. And what's really funny is that this is the least impressive thing that we can do, but it's the one that's selling the most, right? But essentially here we have real-time tracking of individuals' focus, and the Air Force is using it right now in order to track Air Force pilots. And we actually have 2 SBIRs, small business innovation grants with them, and we just got Air Force validation, which means that we can start going toward contracts and an Air Force sponsor. But essentially we can track and we can identify when an individual is reaching fatigue 30 minutes before they get there, and be able to essentially alert individuals about before they get into any accidents. And then we also have a application that comes with it. It's essentially a dashboard that's able to track this level of focus and provide that information to others. But now we're also going to be talking about silent computer control. So this is where we need a ton of data. And this next video that I was going to show you is essentially somebody wearing those headphones that you have right there. But essentially what they're doing is they're thinking about specific words: play, pause, and next track. Now, we can't do what an invasive system can do, right? We can't type full sentences. But what we can do is imagine having your next generation computer. Essentially either an AR device or a pair of Apple AirPods or a pair of headphones. And now you can send very small messages, launch Spotify, play, pause, move things forward. That's the type of technology that we can do essentially with headphones and earbuds with our tech. And some of you have actually seen some of these devices before in previous conferences that I've actually demoed, and I'm happy to show other people demos as well too after this conference. But this is actually her. She would be controlling Spotify. And you know, it's really cool to see silent communication. Essentially, she's thinking of a word and it's becoming a command. Our dictionary sets, though, once again, 4 words at this point, but they're in real time, and that's pretty significant. And we really see the world of wearables changing. We really see the world of brain-computer interfaces changing as well, too. Right now, they're being used for cognitive performance and basic control, at least for us. But in the future, we can use these to gather biomarkers, create silent speech systems, start enabling closed-loop therapies. And we actually have early work that we're doing right now with ADHD clinic and a Parkinson's group as well, too, with our technology. And this is just a few of the kind of big picture things that we've accomplished in the last amount of time, which I'm really proud about the team. We're actually going to be launching our first product in 2023. So the tech works well enough that we've actually licensed it to a major headphone brand. And we have 2 other OEM contracts for 2024 and 2025. So very soon, I'm not talking like 10 years from now, 5 years from now, I'm saying this year, you're going to be able to go off the shelf and buy a high-quality brain-computer interface that gives you the ability to not just track your own cognitive biomarkers, but on top of that, do very simple control of your applications. And when it comes to the Air Force, we're also starting to get this technology down to the point that we're putting inside pilots for warfighters essentially, and even on the ground individuals as well too. Like I said, we have two contracts right now, 2 grants, and in the near future, this is going to just be a part of what soldiers wear. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for their time. I look forward for any questions. And BCI World is coming. It's happening this year. Thanks.
Okay, Anna Micah is going to be joining us virtually. Thank you, Anna. Or Anna.
Hello, can you hear me and can you see me?
We can hear you. We don't see your slides yet.
Oh, no? Okay, let me pull them up here.
There they are. Just need to put them in presenter mode.
Yes.
There, perfect.
So it's great. I'm so sorry I'm not there. You know how much I love the community. Matt, Jojo, Erica, Carolina, all of you are there. I think it takes a village to change brain technology, and I love this village. I love this community, so I'm sorry I cannot play hard with you this time, but no worry. I know we'll find each other on another occasion. So my name is Ana Maikes. I'm the CEO and founder of Neuroelectrics. And so I want to start with some of the comments that some of my colleagues made. My company was originally created in Barcelona, but we scale up to Boston, where we have our offices and also our investors. So, you know, to be honest, I believe we are a global company and we manufacture in Barcelona, but we sell today to researchers worldwide in more than 45 countries. So, you know, for exports control, I think that companies like us tend to operate at a global scale. We have more than 25 countries. We are 100 people almost. And my clients are all over the world. The patients are all over the world. And the talent doesn't have gender, geography, or sex, right? So I think that's one of the things I wanted to mention, that we are really a global company. So to get started, let's start by some music. So this is a pretty sad song, and when I go to conferences, I tend to tell people that what we are trying to do in this room today, most of the companies, is to make the sound in our brains sound happy and not sad. I think that the electrical system in the brain, when it's distorted, when you suffer from depression, and the connections across neurons are not healthy, we create this kind of sad, distorted sound. So it is the objective of the people in this room and of our community to really help those brains to heal and create a better music. So this is the quest that we've been working with Neuroelectrics for a very long time. And I don't know if you see my image, but basically I'm wearing the device right now. Basically, it's an EEG and transcranial current stimulation system. It's a portable device, non-invasive. You can take it home. And as I said, 32 electrodes that independently can either read or write in your brain. So if I would make a demo right now, this is what you would see. You would see, this is my electrical brain activity called electroencephalography. And so people have described in previous presentations what it is. But what we are more excited is that any of the electrodes that you can see in this representation can also be used to send little electrical currents into the brain. Those currents, and as you can see in this model, can be either excitatory or inhibitory, and we can do this in a network mode because we are covering the whole area of the brain, so 32 electrodes. So with this technology that is called transcranial current stimulation, I think one of the benefits is that it's not painful, it's low intensity, but of course it can only get to the cortical areas of the brain. So I think it also has its limitations versus other neuromodulation techniques. It's been out there for a pretty long time. There is even a movement on do-it-yourself that we have discussed at length with Anna Wexler and Karen in many occasions. But the benefit of transcranial current stimulation is that if you compare it to other modalities non-invasive like TMS or ECT, the order of magnitude is quite different. But in more than 18,000 patients being stimulated in the literature, it's a relatively safe technology. So we think that if you send patients home with this technology and over and over and over they receive stimulation, you're going to have an add-on effect. And I'm going to show you some data that sustains that. So the future, my co-founder is a physicist and a mathematician. We truly believe that it's not only about sending currents into the brain, but understanding what you're doing to the brain. Remember, we have the scalp. This is non-invasive. So we really need to model what amount of current is getting into the brain. And for that, we are engaged in what we call neurotwins. We are building digital copies of the brain on the cloud. There was a session by the FDA organized last year on the modeling side in which we participated. And we are really working hard to build a biophysical and physiological model of the brain. We have started with epilepsy. We are also building one for Alzheimer's, and we have 25 people in the company only doing brain models. We believe this brain modeling aspect is going to be the future to personalize therapy. So I left 7 years ago, beautiful Barcelona, to, let's say, interesting Boston, to really do a clinical trial on epilepsy with the support of the government of Massachusetts. I have to acknowledge the tremendous help of the FDA. The FDA has been amazing with neuroelectrics. It was led by Carlos Peña at the moment we started our clinical trial, but I can only say nice words about the FDA and their support. So we started our first clinical trial in epilepsy with patients that don't respond to medication, and the alternative is surgery. And what we did is 20 minutes of stimulation, 10 consecutive days. And then what we did is we asked the neurologist to give us an MRI and an EEG of each individual patient. And based on the MRI and the EEG, the neurologists had to tell us where the patients had the focus. These are focal refractory epileptic patients. And in our software, they will paint, in this case, where the seizures were coming from. And it's blue because they need inhibition. So based on that target on the brain, our brain modeling team builds a 3D replica of the brain of that patient. And then we compute how many electrodes and how much current we need to inject into each individual patient. Based on that protocol, we managed to show in our pilot study a 47% seizure reduction. I remind you, this is non-invasive, and these patients don't have any other solution than surgery. So the FDA granted us breakthrough designation, and with this data, and that's for another story, I was able to raise $20 million of Series A to now in Boston by really nice investors to now do a pivotal phase 3 study with 190 patients. So as we speak, there are 22 US hospitals recruiting patients today. It's a randomized controlled trial. And if we sustain these effects, we will become, in 2 years, end of 24, the first company to go through the FDA for this new indication. So wish me luck, and my team, we are very happy and excited to really complete the phase 3 pivotal trial. But we will not stop there. We also reached out to the FDA during the pandemic to do a study in depression. The beautiful thing about depression is that we stimulated now 30 patients fully at home. So these patients receive 30 days of stimulation at home, and the results are really nice. So we hope we can move also into pivotal phase soon, and we expect results also in 2 years. So the future is definitely going home. We believe that under prescription, patients should be prescribed our therapy. And I've been involved with many of you in many neuroethics debates across the globe. And I think that one of the things that I'm worried about is, the issues of data privacy, responsibility, the complexity, the cost, and the time to market devices. So those are some of the things that I think that we could take, and also the do-it-yourself movement. There is a lot of people doing this at home, without any safety profile. But just to tell you that my team and I will be working like crazy, like every day, until we make the music in those brains healthy again. And I hope the brains will sound like this. This is that ice cold Michelle fight for that white gold. This one for them hood girls. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, so next we have Brian Pepin from Rune Labs, who is going to start at 2:50. Do we have his slides? Or is he showing them from he's bringing them up?
No presentation.
No presentation, okay, he's just going to talk. And thank you all for keeping on time this far, and for Anna for giving us that music pep that we need at this time of the day, I think. Okay, Brian will be joining shortly.
Anna, if you could unshare your screen.
Also, Ramses, did you get your headphones back, or did somebody take those as a free gift? Okay. Or if we look under our seats, do we all have a free set of headphones? No, okay. Okay, because that would actually be a conflict if Brian here, so good. Okay. Okay, here's Brian.
Hi. Should I just talk then?
Anna, could you turn off your camera?
Turn off?
No,
Not you.
Anna. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Okay, yeah, no, nice to meet everybody. Sorry I can't be there. My third anniversary is yesterday and my wife is 7 months pregnant, so I have to, keep my priorities straight. I do not have slides, and I just kind of want to make a few simple points. First, I'll kind of introduce myself. I'm Brian. I'm CEO of a company called Rune Labs. We're a precision neurology company with a special focus on Parkinson's. And for those who don't kind of have any context for what that means, basically we bring data together from a pretty wide variety of different sources, traditional clinical data, wearable data, genetic data, and also data from what I'll call like our primitive versions, maybe, of some of the brain-computer interface technologies that I've heard folks talking about today. And we bring the data together and we find patterns in that data, and then we match those patterns for patients and clinicians to help them dose and titrate therapies that they're on, to help them transition onto and match them to therapies that might be a better fit for them, and also to match them into clinical trials and support them in clinical trials. And like I said, we're doing that in Parkinson's today. We're doing some early work in MS, and we work with researchers who are expanding some of these technologies and practices to other areas of neurodegenerative disease and even kind of psychiatry and some adjacent things. So you can see like my kind of background and view on this whole thing is very data centric, and sort of more about the data coming out of these devices and how it might be used versus the also very important interventional part. But my expertise is on the data, so I'll mostly talk about that. And I think I really just have two maybe simple points. One is that the data, even today, even with as little as we know about it, is already proving clinically useful. So not even just, there's plenty of interesting scientific research that it's being used for, but clinically useful. And the specific context where I'm most confident saying that is around data that comes to us from deep brain stimulation devices that have a sensing capability. So these are, again, kind of, I'm not sure how much has been talked about, but sort of, you can think about them as a sort of primitive version of maybe some of the brain-computer interfaces, the implanted ones that have been shown. They're a well-known treatment for Parkinson's movement symptoms. Recently, companies have started to integrate a brain sensing ability in addition to the stimulation ability that's traditionally used. And so we at Rune Labs ingest that data along with all the other stuff, and again, try to make it useful for clinicians, and been able to do so around both the provisioning of the deep brain stimulation therapy itself, but also in understanding more about the patient's disease and how they're responding to medications. And fundamentally, one interesting thing about this data is that it really tells you something about what's going on in the brain network. And if you're dealing with a brain network disorder, that is useful, and it's not a window that clinicians have typically had. So it's early days, but already a lot of promise. That's kind of point one. The second point is related in that we're really just at the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of unknown. I think a lot about like genetic data, for example, and the journey that we've taken over the last 30 years with that since the Human Genome Project. And my sense is that in terms of kind of where we're at, we're somewhere maybe pre-HGP starting, so like around where genetics was in 1990. Like we're starting to see more data. We're starting to get some really exciting results, hints of where to go, but we don't really have our like HGP Human Genome Project for brain signal data yet. Maybe we'll get there. We're at a phase where worldwide collaboration is extremely beneficial. Information sort of comes from everywhere. Papers are coming from everywhere. The ability for different researchers around the world and different clinics around the world to leverage this technology is going to be important to get through this next phase of development for sure. And so hopefully the the panel who's considering export controls can kind of balance the risks with the sort of rewards there. And then I guess I heard this discussion earlier, and I'll just kind of think on it. I think there probably is some parallels to thinking about how genetic sequencers were controlled in this way. So my understanding is that genetic sequencers started to be controlled in the sort of early 2000s because of their the ability for folks to like create viruses and things, pathogens with them. That was, again, about maybe 10 years after Human Genome Project started. And I think, like I said, equivalently, maybe in terms of, particularly the data side and the understanding of what to do with it, we're somewhere kind of equivalent to what before the HGP started. So maybe we're, 10 years or so away from kind of being at an equivalent level where some of the same rationales might apply that started to have folks do the controls on gene sequencers. So that's all I really wanted to share with the panel. So happy to transition into the next phase.
Okay, great, Brian, thank you. Okay, so what we'll do now is we have some time for questions. And I want to put out there a consideration that now we're not going to go too far into the weeds of a lot of the explicit questions that were asked in the Federal Register that many people responded to, but I will share that there were specific questions asked that divided technologies not into just non-invasive and invasive, but also into hardware, software, and data. So there is an interest in understanding how those different elements might be differentially explored, regulated, et cetera. And I think that's something maybe this particular panel is good for speaking towards. So I wonder if anybody wants to start to address that, and then let's see if we have any other questions. If we have questions from the audience, feel free to line up behind the podium or not podium, behind the microphone, or Ted can also run a microphone to you. So.
Most people think that we're a hardware company, but we're actually a software company. We have one hardware person on our entire team, essentially. I think that, at least my perspective, is that there's huge gains right now when it comes to how we can use signal processing and modern filtration and neural networks to really boost performance, especially in non-invasive, because there's a huge performance gap. I think when it comes to medical applications and clinical studies, like, the tools that are out there right now are good enough, but when you're talking about scaling them to, millions and billions of people and having something that's consistent, there's still a lot of evolution there. We haven't found that much difference from hardware to hardware, but when it comes to signal processing, that's where I think the biggest gap is, and that's where we spend a lot of our time.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to weigh in?
Well, I think at least from my perspective at Cognition, is working. We're very much a medical device company in terms of our positioning. And so when we think about data privacy issues, we're primarily thinking about things like GDPR and HIPAA compliance and those sorts of issues. And we think about those broadly across all the data sets that we ingest, not just the brain data. And as I sort of alluded to in my talk, the brain data is probably the least interesting data that we ingest, because things like location in space, utterances, search history, all that kind of stuff is way more personally revealing than the brain data that we're able to get at a commercial scale right now.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Carolina.
In our case, I mean, I think there is a solid foundation, but it's a foundation when it comes, for instance, for artificial intelligence for medical devices. I just recently read the Good AI Practices recently released by the FDA, and they provide a very good ground about how to deal with it, but it's not going to be sufficient if we want intelligent therapies that are providing really the highest benefit. So I think it's going to be a conversation and an evolution as we show the data and we show the safety of these algorithms going forward.
I think that's right. It does feel a little funny explaining this when we have David McMullen sitting right there. So I think we're kind of FDA explaining, I guess, right now. But we have a class 2 and class 3 medical device, and I think a lot of what we do with the data on top of the widgets themselves, I think, helps determine what those different processes look like. So there's a lot of partnership that I think is going to be involved going forward, and FDA has been awesome from my experience at Abbott and the 3 weeks I've been here. So I'm looking forward to figuring this out with their partnership.
Okay, thank you, Erica. We have a queue lining up here, so maybe we could get started with that queue. Please introduce yourself for new people who have entered and your affiliation.
Sure. My name is Zoe. I'm with ALS Heroes, and my question is specifically for Chris. I'm extremely fascinated by the intersection between BCI and AR and VR. Could you comment a little bit and expand about what exactly the efficacy was that you found with your trials with ALS patients, and maybe what you perceive the timeline to be to get this to market?
Sure, I can share a little bit of the efficacy data. So we looked at patients, one of our earliest patients actually was late stage to the point where there was no eye movement control whatsoever. And actually they were able to respond, I think it was 80+% in that range. But the thing which is interesting is that it was kind of forcefully double blind in the sense that the patient didn't speak English at all. And all of our staff that were sort of facilitating the trial were English only. And so the questions that were being asked, we had no idea what the answer was. And so it turned out that it actually worked quite well enough for that early stage. I think we're looking at a much higher efficacy when we go actually take it to market. The date to market is likely mid 2024 would be my guess. It depends a little bit on FDA, but I think we're confident that we can get, given the risk profile of the device, we're confident we can get to a good outcome in that time frame.
Thank you. Anna? Your name and affiliation again, just for new people who've stepped in.
Anna Wexler, University of Pennsylvania. So I think the data point is a really interesting question for this panel, and I think especially because some of the companies here are pursuing a number of applications, so not just medical, but also consumer applications. And so I guess this question is potentially for cognition, for Neurable, and for Rune, for Brian. I know you're not doing consumer applications, but Rune, I mean, you're taking wearable data and it sounds like bringing it into the medical context, and then Neurable and cognition, right? Are you guys thinking about, like, is there any difference in the way that you're thinking about protecting the data or gathering the data when you're thinking about different applications, both for all your different applications, but I'm particularly interested in medical applications versus just consumer applications?
I mean, I think from our perspective, we have to be very careful and think about GDPR compliance and HIPAA compliance in particular. And so when we're architecting our, well, so the device operates in a kind of hybrid state where there's a computer that's built into it, but there's also a cloud component. And so that cloud component, we have to be very mindful of the authentication, encryption, data storage considerations so that we're compliant with all of those, you know, patient anonymity and GDPR restrictions on data location and so on. So that's definitely a key component of the device, and we have to be very thoughtful about it. Beyond that, I don't think there's anything particularly special about the BCI space or the space that we're operating in that gives us different considerations, other than, you know, we have to do it, essentially.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we have a very similar perspective. We follow HIPAA standards. We came from a university laboratory, so that's where our core is at. I used to be in the neuroethics panel, and my co-founder is known a lot in the neuroethics scene, including writing a few different chapters on neuroethics themselves. So right now, we're in the process of actually going through a neuroethics audit at our company to make sure that when the technology gets released, individuals understand the data that we're providing to them. They understand their rights. They understand that we're not going to sell their data, that it is owned by them. And I think that this isn't just important from the perspective of like, we messed up with the internet, let's do this better. But I think it's important from the perspective of like, brain-computer interfaces are about to connect you with your technology, and that's really personal when you're thinking about your brain, right? There's something sacred about the brain. And sure, maybe we can't pick up data that's identifying who you are, but we should still give that level of respect. And so from that perspective, we're making sure to us and a few other companies we're talking to, how do we create these standards and leaderships so that we can protect individuals and create the new standard for brain-computer interfaces as they become massively available.
Great. Brian, did you want to weigh in? I think you were called out.
Yeah, I mean, I know there are like, I think folks like larger companies that maybe have hybrid structures, but for a relatively small company, our sort of only option is to just treat it all as essentially healthcare data or medical data. So, echoing stuff on the consent side, that means, we're signing business associate agreements and doing some of the other kind of compliance and legal things required. Yeah, as soon as we start basically bringing data into the patient-clinician relationship, yeah, we just treat it all as healthcare data, no matter where it's sort of coming from.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, we have more people in the queue.
Yeah, hi, Danny Bell from BlackRock Neurotech. I just wanted to maybe pose a question that sort of came up in the last panel about COGS and fabrication costs. I know that that's obviously important for Caroline working on graphene electrodes, but this is a diverse panel, and I just wonder about how these sort of national, international relationships factor into the kinds of devices that you're building and dependencies on external or foreign entities.
Yeah, so there were the two questions there. I mean, with respect to the cost of graphene, for instance, graphene is very cheap. It's carbon, so carbon it comes from graphite. I mean, it's very cheap. Like one bottle can do thousands of these neural interfaces. So from that perspective, is not a problem from the raw material and things like that. But obviously, to create such a device, like all of us, we depend on the international and global supply chain, which is not in the best shape now. You will agree on. And it's really a global issue. So I mean, when it comes to this conversation about import and exports, it's really important that we keep a free flow of this supply chain, and that we facilitate the way towards international purchasing, for instance. And then we just need to be able to manage how do we design and produce those implantables so they are sellable, let's say. I mean, companies are for the good of the patients, but if there's not a margin, we cannot keep in reinvesting on new indications. So they have to be profitable so we could keep on growing and keep on benefiting those patients. But it's always an art, especially when you are small. When you are small, you don't have any margin whatsoever. So we rely on that global capacity of supply chain.
Anna, do you want to weigh in on that?
Well, yeah, I think it's a great question, and we manufacture around 400 devices last year, and the supply chain with the chips crisis was terrible. I'm very proud of my team on the production side that was capable of ensuring chips, and that for the export control is important. I think allowing the companies in times of crisis, and I don't think it's going to get better, to really get the components and the materials from where we need it is really important. And I think that we have that agility we have the license to manufacture medical devices in Europe. We are, under FDA, we comply with HIPAA. We have all these regulations and audits. It's really tough to run a medical device hardware company. The level of scrutiny and processes and red tape in the company is astonishing. But I think that if we give at least the companies the flexibility to move around the globe, on the production side, I think it makes our lives easier, and we could deliver all of our devices to clients worldwide because we had that flexibility.
Thank you, Anna.
I would probably add one thing, if I may, which is more and more some of these neural interfaces, I'm sure, will be manufactured with semiconductors technology, and all these investment from the CHIPS Act and in Spain is the PERTE, are going to help because semiconductors technology is very, very expensive. That is what is going to make these devices a make or a break, I think, in the future. So that there's more investment and that we could lower the cost of producing in semiconductors with semiconductors technology is also going to help. So I think everything interlinks later strategically.
I think I can add another perspective, I guess. So for me, I think the chips issue is obviously a big deal for everyone making hardware. You know, probably you feel it as well. It's, you know, we're making 12-month risk buys that have to then be amortized into the product when we do actually make it. But the point I want to make actually slightly different is my background actually is primarily in IP and licensing. And the issue that we haven't really talked about here is IP enforcement or IP applicability, particularly in certain countries where it's not as enforceable. And I think that's an area where there's a tremendous opportunity for the U.S. government to do something to help make us more competitive in the sense that if we have IP, it's actually real and useful and not just a waste of money that we're, you know, amortizing into our products again.
Yeah. As we move into kind of concretizing some of the ways we're approaching these, thinking about approaching regulation, thinking about IP options, thinking about software, hardware, data. One of the other scoping issues that was brought up in Anna Wexler's talk in the beginning is still an important one. So in the initial call for regulation on 14 emerging technologies, the word neurotechnology was used. But then in the Federal Register, the word or the term BCI was used, which scopes some different technologies. And in addition to that, there is a conversation around, you know, would an EMG be considered part of a BCI or neurotechnology? And also, would data or software or part of these things be considered something you would pull out as neurotechnology, when in the reality, a lot of these technologies are working in an ecosystem of other digital technologies and other things. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about how you are, you know, I think Ramsey, as you put it, you know, this is something really sacred. And, you know, Chris, I think you kind of, well, it's data as GDPR. Maybe we could take this opportunity to see how this panel might weigh in on those kinds of distinctions.
I hope that this is a very controversial topic because I think those are the best ones. So my personal opinion is that there has to be a distinction between, you know, brain data and other types of data, more so from the perspective of like invasive than non-invasive. Like there's even that separation. And when it comes to EMG and EEG also as well too, right? And now at our company, we still use the concept of BCI as anything that can give you information about human intent, right? So it can be an accelerometer, it can be these other types of devices. But even we internally make a distinction because even if it's just a perception, the mind is sacred, and especially when we're talking about something that's, you know, going to become, you know, that is an invasive technology. You know, our technology, for example, I don't think gets as deep as these invasive systems. Now you really have to pay respect to that, right? And I think that lumping them all into one group really either undervalues the human brain and what it's capable of and what we can get out of it, or it cheapens everything else, right? And so we really need to understand like what is each individual kind of component and how it works, and really respect that. And I think AI is finally teaching that to us, and we're seeing how the web, for example, has taught that to us, and we should learn from those lessons.
Anyone else?
I'm going to agree but disagree.
Okay, great.
So I think I agree with you completely in principle in the sense that we should treat the human mind data as sacred. I think the challenge that regulators are likely to face is the definitions of precisely where that threshold is. And so, at least from my perspective, things like EMG or accelerometer data or whatnot are, without some other context, are relatively meaningless and sort of commoditized in a sense, and it would be hard for me to imagine how you would regulate that meaningfully. When you get to implants, maybe you've got to that threshold. And I think this touches on a point that the previous session ended on, which is when is the right time to think about whether or not we've crossed the line, essentially. And I would say, well, once the technology is able to do something that you can't otherwise do, is sort of my brief answer to that, right? Right now, when I look at BCI technology, I can do what, like, as an able-bodied person, I would never choose that as the way to interface with something because it's so slow and high error, right? And so once it surpasses that threshold, then maybe, right? Then maybe it's something worth thinking about. And so that's how I think about that, maybe that transition point, but it's all in definitions and it has to be very carefully thought about or else we're going to get into trouble.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure I'm not saying that we should regulate it, not right now, but what I am, yeah, I think we're on the same page. We're more on the same page than not.
Okay. Does anybody else from the panel want to weigh in before we wrap up the session?
I think that one interesting debate I have on the daily basis, one thing that maybe the audience can help me is I have hundreds of patients reaching out to me, like, can I buy your device for epilepsy or depression? And I say, no way, we are doing clinical trials. You either enroll in our trials or you have to wait. But then they go online and they buy, stimulation devices from Amazon and they apply them themselves without any knowledge. So no matter how sideways we want to look, this is happening. There are patients out there reaching out to medical companies, but also reaching out to Amazon and buying devices and applying them on themselves. So, that's happening today, no 5 years from now. And that's something that I think at the level of awareness, we need to face and we need to do something about that.
Okay, I think we're going to have to wrap up the session, but let's keep continuing this thread through the next few days. Let's thank our panel, our virtual and in-person participants. Okay, and we'll have two talks coming up from David McMullen from FDA. I think Heather Dean will also come up here for the Q&A, and then also Jose Milan. So we're just pushing through this last bit, so hang in there. We saved some of the most interesting stuff for the end, so hang in there with us.
Interesting. Never heard the FDA talk described as the most interesting being saved for last, but appreciate that. Closer to the mic. Right. Hi there, I'm David McMullen. I'm the Office Director for OHT5, and I will, in a few slides, explain what that means. Today, I'm going to be discussing the regulation of brain computer interface devices. And I just want to start off by thanking everyone for coming today, for taking part in this, especially the patients and patient families. It's been very informative. And we really do take the conversations and the knowledge we gain from these interactions when we go back and think about the regulatory approach. So I like to think about the organizational structures. What does FDA mean? So our responsibility is to promote and protect the public health. And at FDA, we regulate a broad range of products, many of which you're familiar with, drugs, biologics, which can be vaccines, or as we heard today, gene therapy. Medical devices are regulated within the Center for Devices and Radiological Health. So within CDRH, as we call it, we have several different offices, and there's going to be no pop quiz. You don't have to remember which number corresponds to what, but you can almost think about it as a medical review of systems. So we're indication oriented, so different offices like OHT1, you'd have some more of your vision-based devices there. Within OHT5, we call ourselves the Office of Neurological and Physical Medicine Devices. So you can imagine there's a lot of brain-related technology there. As I said, I'm the Office Director for OHT5. And within our office, we have two divisions, our 5A division that has a lot of the neurosurgical, neurointerventional, neurodiagnostic devices. And then our 5B, which is our division of neuromodulation and physical medicine devices. Most of you will likely are creating medical devices that are going to be regulated by one of the teams in what we call 5B, although you all come up with some very interesting and novel devices, some of that might span into 5A. So if you do see different names in your correspondence, just understand that we can talk internally and understand how these things work. Very importantly for today's discussion, I did want to highlight our one of our 5B teams in physical medicine, our acute injury team. That's led by our Assistant Director, Heather Dean, who is joining me up here, and one of our great lead reviewers and acting team leads, Julia Slocum. And this team oversees brain-computer interface devices. So if you're building one of those, you definitely want to chat with them today. So the FDA takes a risk-based approach for medical devices, and as the risk level increases, the level of regulatory control necessary to provide a reasonable assurance of safety and effectiveness also increases. So this broadly, we have three classification categories, class 1, 2, and 3. You could think about these broadly as low, moderate, and high risk. And you can almost put canonical examples of, surgical glove as class 1, non-implantable, let's say TMS, non-implantable brain stimulator is class 2, and some of our chronic implantable brain stimulation devices, such as deep brain stimulation, within class 3. And there's, like I said, increasing regulatory control necessary there. The FDA likes to think about the total product life cycle, and this is laid out in a linear fashion here. But as all of you innovators know, this is both circular and iterative, and we're well aware of that as well. But to try to flatten it out, simplify it, you come up with this discovery and you're thinking through, and then you go through this process of prototyping the device, collecting all the preclinical, non-clinical data that's necessary, and then beginning your clinical studies and hopefully getting a regulatory clearance or approval. You can launch your product, and then working on post-market. As we heard, there's also a very important step of reimbursement and coverage. Not trying to minimize that, but from the FDA's perspective, this is what we focus on. As you can see below, there's a broad range of times where we like to say that we're open to pre-submissions. That's your opportunity to come and interact with us. And we like to say come early, sometimes come often, but the early allows you and us to discuss what might be the best pathway to get you to that first-in-human study or across the finish line with your pivotal trial, and to avoid any unnecessary tests and to really make sure we're on the same page. Just highlighting two of the major milestones, again, to simplify a complicated process, but when you're going from preclinical to clinical, for many studies, especially the significant risk devices, you'd require an IDE, and that's to enable that study, an investigational device exemption. And then, you're trying to run that pivotal study, that large clinical trial that would get regulatory approval or clearance through our PMA, de novo, 510K, or HDE, humanitarian device exemption pathways. So we were asked to talk about some of the companies and trials that are ongoing. As you know, FDA does not comment on a lot of these trials that are ongoing, but you can use some of our resources. This is just pulled from clinicaltrials.gov. I even recently talked about this with our office. It's a great resource. Highly recommend if people are ever interested in different technology areas, want to understand what's already out there, what clinical studies are ongoing that might be funded through the government or posted. You can go on there. They have a new version coming out soon, and just type in the medical condition, the specific company or the device type of area. And so if you're interested in implantable brain-computer interfaces, you can go type it in for spinal cord injury, for ALS, or just generally BCI. Type that in, and then you can get a list of trials that are ongoing. Now, any one company can have multiple trials, but there's more information in any of these blue links. So just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that this is a helpful resource to know what's going on in the field. So for some helpful resources specifically from FDA, I just listed several here. And again, please feel free to take pictures of all of these. We have a guidance document for implanted brain-computer interface devices that was put out a few years ago now. In 2021, we hosted a webinar for this guidance on implanted BCI devices. And so if that is relevant to you, I do recommend taking a look at those. And then from a more general overview of the neurological devices, over the years, we've also had a few different perspective pieces that have come out that detail our regulatory approach. So one thing I did want to mention is this idea of a collaborative community. It's something we've been talking about, but want to make sure that everyone's aware of. And so collaborative communities are supposed to be public open forums where both public and private sector members can come together to work together to achieve common objectives. Some of the things you've heard about today are what are the outcome metrics that will be utilized in this? How will folks get reimbursement and coverage? What type of standards might be used. So these are different topic areas that collaborative communities can be involved with. You can see icons for the entire community, whether it's FDA on the regulatory side, patients and patient advocacy organizations, funders. You have Nick Lengel's in here representing NIH, NINDS, BRAIN, maybe even ARPA-H. So there's a lot of different groups that can be brought to the table to work on this collaboratively. Again, and that can include payers, which is, I guess, the umbrella and the money symbol, possibly. But it's a way to bring people together to work on these, I would say, pre-competitive or non-competitive areas that are still very important for any company to succeed. I just wanted to provide our contact information. Again, apologize a little bit cramped there. Again, I'm David McMullen and joined by Heather and Julia, so please feel free to reach out, and just wanted to say that patients are at the heart of everything that we do. And so we just want to ensure that patients in the US have access to high quality, safe, and effective medical devices, first in the world. Thank you.
So, good afternoon. It is a great pleasure. It is the Spanish day today. and the second Swiss. I am Spanish and Swiss. And I spent a long time at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, Lausanne. So I am a young professor at the UT University of Texas at Austin, because I just arrived 3 years ago from Europe. And I wanted to share a little bit the vision on BCI research from first the non-invasive side, second from a strong European side, and third from the BCI society, where I have been serving in the board since the inception in 2015. I am now past president. So the European way of managing research projects, sorry for this overlap, is essentially multidisciplinary. It is essentially multinational, because it is required that we have consortia made of different teams with different specialties in different countries. So this creates this sense of collaboration, that we need to advance together. And importantly, in this consortia has to be also partners from industry, so that we can not only think in terms of what it is good for the sake of research, but how this research can be translated to products, and eventually, in the case of BCI, to final end users. I have been privileged to be the PI of several European projects, in particular the first ever BCI project in Europe, and the largest one, where we had 13 consortia spanning all the sites. So at the very beginning, when I was still in Italy at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, actually, we started to develop the basic of BCI research. And then little by little, we started to move this research towards practical devices, assistive devices for people with disabilities, with strong disabilities. And on the way, because of these large consortia, we started to develop standards that were shared, especially across the major BCI labs in Europe and beyond. So a little bit about the International BCI Society. We have currently more than 500 members over more than 40 countries. To give you some more numbers, when we did the last BCI meeting that was virtual 2 years ago, we had 395 delegates, 271 labs, and 41 countries. And in this BCI society, we have a special care to integrate not only those who are working on implanted BCIs, or only those who are working on non-invasive, or only academic. No, we have everything. In our board, we have a balanced representation between implanted, non-invasive, and we reach out constantly to end users, constantly to industry, to have represented their voices. So while I was doing this research, I started to get more and more, or giving more and more priority to the translational work of this research. So over the years, we have been running a substantial number of longitudinal studies with people suffering from severe motor disabilities. In this particular case over here, it was an international competition to highlight the need of assistive devices in order to help people do things that they cannot do otherwise. So during this work, and they were tetraplegic, both of the people with whom we were working, and so they work. We have not found yet a case where if you don't invest sufficient time to train people, they cannot control their devices. In this case, it was a virtual game. More recently, it was their own wheelchairs. And here I am illustrating a quite severe, highly tetraplegic case who requires assisted ventilation. They were managing to drive their wheelchair in the hospital, naturally. So translational work, longitudinal work is what drives my work, my research today. Because one of the lessons that we are learning is that as people use their BCIs, since in particular non-invasive BCIs require the orchestration of networks, there are plastic changes that happen in the brain. And this means that now we can also do and run rehabilitation trials. And in this particular case, people, chronic, in some cases 10 years after their stroke, they recover substantial mobility. So I was touched this morning, as I believe everyone here, by the stories that you were sharing with us, your personal stories. So I have my personal stories from the other side, and I am about to start crying because it so happened to me that every time that one of these people come to the lab and manage to get good control, everybody cries. Everybody cries. So the personal story that I want to share with you was one of the first patients in this trial. He was a man, his arm was completely plegic. And one day I enter and he starts shouting at me, "Professor, professor, look at me, I can move my arm." So that day I was convinced that this is what I want to do, the translational work, because this is helping people. Even if afterwards I get out of business because nobody will be using a BCI. But what a dream, isn't it? So we have been working with a substantial number of people, more than 200 people with severe motor disabilities. And at a certain moment, Switzerland, that seems to be paradise, falls short to me. And I came to the US because I have this urgency to increase those numbers that I am putting over there, to expand this work in motor disabilities to cognitive disabilities, and to accelerate the translation. And why the US. Why Austin in particular? Because there we have a strong multidisciplinary ecosystem that is made of academia, of industry. Thanks, Matt. You are moving ahead, Austin. And healthcare, in particular the new medical school at the University of Texas at Austin. So we need open collaborations in order to keep moving in innovation. And the BCI field and society is still very young. We are dynamic, we are friends, we love to meet to each other. Then we discuss as crazy. But first we enjoy, and then we go for a glass of wine. Thank you very much.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And I think we're getting some time back. So I think we have this great opportunity now. The FDA has been called out several times throughout this event. So now is a chance to actually, now we have 3 people to field those questions. You can switch your mic on. If it's not working, maybe Ted can help. And then also we had Jose, in addition to David, introduce this idea of communities and collaborative communities and ones that involve a variety of stakeholders. So I think we, as we think about our work, like I said in the beginning, the expectation is not that we were going to come up with specific conclusions today to end up being able to definitively help them make decisions about what kind of export control they write. But we do have the start of a community who could be serving as a resource for these kinds of conversations. So I wonder if, I think BCI Society has done some similar work. I wonder, David, if you want to speak a little bit more about the collaborative community and ways that it might be able to be a resource to inform these kinds of conversations with the level of detail they need to write sophisticated regulation. And I know you have a special sense from being at NIH, so you passed.
All right, thank you. Just checking this is working. Yeah, so I do just want to be clear that somewhat confusingly, the FDA would not lead or run this collaborative community. So we are very enthusiastic about the idea of a collaborative community, and we will be active participants in it, but we wouldn't be the ones that would be running or convening it.
So are you looking for volunteers at this event to help?
Yes, I would say the goal is to achieve something similar to this. Imagine we were all part of this community prior to this event today. I would imagine this would be a roundtable discussion at something like that. So, trying to capture this, distill that into a collaborative community that can meet at some interval, some frequency to cover, both near-term and long-term, but, especially importantly, near-term actionable items that will inform both regulatory and reimbursement decision-making.
Jose, did you want to weigh in?
I would like to comment because so something that we never managed to do in Europe is to bring the regulatory offices to our communities. But one of the big changes that happened in Europe 5-7 years ago was to create these communities where our end users were not just there to test our systems. They were fully partners of our consortia because we were integrating them since the very beginning. We were integrating not only the end users, but the secondary end users that are the therapists, that are these special. I don't know whether you have these. I need still to know more about the US ecosystem, but in Europe, the transition of assistive technology to people who need them happens through special houses where people go, they are advised, they receive the training, they configure for them whatever technology they need. So we were incorporating also those people into our teams because it is only through them that we can reach out to the final end users. And this was magic because all of a sudden you start seeing perspectives that you have never considered.
Thank you, Jose. Tom.
David, can you, I don't know if I've got this right, but can you, the RFA that came out around clinical outcome assessments, I think that was put out by, but I think it might have preceded, I don't know if it came from your group or not, but Can you help us understand the goal of the FDA with that effort and how that would tie in with this collaborative community that you're talking about?
Yeah, so that was funded through the Act for ALS, which was passed and funded through Congress. And there were a few different efforts. One that's ongoing on patient preference landscape analysis for patients with ALS to try to understand what type of studies have been done and how to best approach interacting with patients to qualify that. We did also put out an RFI around clinical outcome assessments and trying to understand and get feedback from the community about what outcome assessments exist right now for communication type BCIs. And I'm waiting for the follow-up. And yeah, so trying to understand what outcome assessments exist currently and what might need to exist in the near future to assess that.
I guess it sounds fascinating, and from my perspective, as we're trying to understand how we should be thinking about that, I'm wondering, those things feeding up to you, do we get visibility on that? Is that going to be publicly available, or is that just going to inform your thinking, and we have to pull it out of you? Because we'd love to see, the results of that, the landscape, the COA. So,
yes. Heather, were you going to also say something?
I was going to say the same thing, David. We want to make sure that this is part of the community discussion. So we're looking at ways to get that information out once we have it as well. And we want to help move the field forward. That's why we're trying to start these conversations about the things that we think are important, like thinking about those outcome assessments, thinking about standards. What things will actually help the field in moving forward and getting to patients.
And I would say that part of this collaborative community is to enable forums to provide this information, because being on the government side, we're in a privileged position that we can have those conversations with a variety of payers, other experts, and learn from them, but we're not the ones building these devices that need to get them across. So instead of one-off interactions, by having a collaborative community and set times where we interact, we can relay some of that knowledge and provide introductions groups that we're even just learning about. So that's some knowledge that we do have locked up, but that we do want to find the best venue for relaying that, because it's often not a publication or something that you could put out.
Yes, please say your name and affiliation.
Blair Casey, Team Gleason Foundation. Are there any existing outcome measurements or studies done in the UK through the BCI Society?
Not that I know.
And are we aware of any historical RFIs like this that maybe touched other emerging solutions?
No. So at FDA, we don't traditionally do the funding as much. I don't know, Nick, if you have any input on any outcome-based RFAs, funding opportunities? To put you on the spot.
Gee, thanks, David. Nick Langhals, NIH. There occasionally are some types of opportunities through NIH. NIH supports all sorts of various different research. There also are kind of other groups. PCORI was mentioned earlier by Jen French, the Patient-Centered Outcome Research Initiative. There we go. Acronym soup. But if people have ideas and want to kind of pursue some of those, a lot of that would be allowable through many of our open kind of NIH funding opportunities to look at some of those.
Yeah. I would say that it's not the traditional NIH style R01, to be honest, but these are very important questions. And so while FDA is not a traditional funder in the same way that NIH does, is that with our limited pool of funds, those are questions that we're focusing on. I do just want to comment before I forget in terms of other public venues, but we will be attending the BCI Society's annual meeting in June and have a workshop focused on these questions, where that is another avenue for us to interact with the community and relay the information we've gleaned over the past few months and years of our careers.
Great, thank you. Michael.
Hi, Michael Mager, Precision Neuroscience. I get BCI is sort of unusual in the medical device world, we're not trying to sort of improve outcome measures by 10% or 20% or 30%. We're trying to, give people functionality that they've lost. And I'm curious sort of how the FDA thinks about that in the context of like clinical trial endpoints, like what's, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
We're still trying to wrap our heads around that. How do you measure the success of allowing someone to go work, right, or finish school? How does that factor into, is this device effective and should it be reimbursed? Right. I think that's where we really want to gather the community to get input on that as we try to wrap our heads around it.
And I would say we've gotten here maybe quicker than many of us would have said, and that's great. Early in our careers, maybe we'd say 10, 20, 30 years, but we're here, but the clinical community hasn't caught up. What is that clinical care pathway? What annual society conferences are we going to? Is it a rehab society? Is it a neurosurgical, neurointerventional? What clinical group is sort of leading this? Whereas other fields of medicine, like you said, might have decades of understanding what their outcome assessments are, what that clinically important difference is, and it's well defined. This area, it's so new, it's exciting, and it's great that we're getting here, and that this is issues we're dealing with right now, but it is definitely new. So, encourage collaborative communities to help work on this.
Thank you, David. Matt.
We've talked a lot about partnerships between public-private, but one thing that just in the course of this organization, I think occurred to Karen and I, is that there are a lot of opportunities for public-public interactions. So for instance, let's take Betty and Tongala at Commerce. If they wanted to learn about BCI quickly, can we think of some ways that a collaborative community might be able to connect them with NIH or with FDA or people who know a lot about BCI? I know Karen's done work with DARPA and the State Department, and it feels like from the non-government side, we have a lot of the same conversations. And if even the government interactions could occur as part of this, that it would level up, everyone's ability to deliver. So I'd be curious, maybe Betty, it looks like you wanted to say something too.
I'd say yes, but.
Matt, I think that's a very good suggestion. And I think also in the government, we are really siloed in our own domains. And we don't even know how to contact other people who are probably in the same topic or the same subjects that are in a different agency. So this particular forum has opened up our eyes, I guess, and given us a chance to collaborate or even to have discussions like that going forward. Thank you.
Wonderful. Jojo, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Jojo Platt, still pro BCI. I'm wondering if to Michael's question earlier about measurable outcomes and some of the arguments that we need to make from a sort of a zero starting point on efficacy, safety, and the argument for reimbursement. Is there a way that we can also start to include considerations like the diminishing populations of clinicians who can serve certain disease states? So as we're facing, for instance, a shortage of psychiatrists and psychologists, and then we have these technologies that are targeting mental health. Can we use that as not just is it safe, effective, and what's the reimbursement rate, but should there be an opportunity to elevate technologies that solve problems like shortages in clinicians and access for equity?
I think that is part of what we think about. Does a technology expand access for patients to a certain therapy? That is part of what we look at when determining breakthrough eligibility, for example. So it is definitely one of the factors that we think about.
Yeah, if you look at the breakthrough guidance, there's some updated guidance, maybe still in draft form, that does highlight access as one of the components.
Julia, do you want to weigh in on?
They've said everything I would have said, so that's
Okay. Important to note, though, please go speak with her if you have questions related to FDA.
That's
okay.
very true.
Well, I think this concludes this last session. Please give our speakers a round of applause. Okay, and so next what we're going to do is Amanda Pustelnik has kindly agreed to give a quick 5-minute synthesis of the day, and that will be kind of our last leaving message before we close out the event. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Karen. My tremendous thanks to everyone who put together this fantastic meeting, all of the speakers, and all of you who've paid such great attention all day long. I will not presume upon your attention for that much longer. I just want to bring together some themes and I hope set us up productively for tomorrow. So Secretary Estevez opened our session this morning by asking, why are we here? Sort of existential question. And he gave us 2 compelling reasons. He said that the Commerce Department has a mission of promoting U.S. trade and also of ensuring U.S. defense overmatch on the battlefield. And how can we, in our work here today, help commerce advance that important goal for U.S. domestic and international security? After asking, why are we here? Marcus Gerhardt from BlackRock Neurotech later said, BCI is here. It's not just something that's coming in the future. It's not 10 or 50 years away. We have it and we will have it increasingly. So we heard through important direct patient experience and from researchers and investors that BCI have present critical utility helping populations of severely affected patients who otherwise have no treatment options. With implanted devices, we heard today about some extraordinary breakthroughs for these most severely affected patients with disorders of movement and communication. And we also heard that through miniaturization, flexibility, and even vascular introduction, these procedures are becoming less complex and such technologies are becoming more accessible. At the same time, implantation of BCI is medically, economically, and personally significant, and the significance of an implantation procedure in itself may work to curtail some of the risks of any potential misuse. It's not exactly plug and play, to make one of the understatements of the decade. Turning to non-implanted BCI, Anna Wexler highlighted that BCI not only is here, in some sense it has been here for about 100 years, since the invention or discovery, depending on how you want to put it, of EEG. So current non-implanted BCI devices primarily depend on EEG, to some extent FNIRS, and until recently, adoption's been very limited. Dry EEG has low fidelity, and so much of the threat and promise of mind reading has not materialized and has stayed firmly in the zone of hype. At the same time, the utility of non-implanted BCIs, as we heard today, is developing by leaps and bounds. Companies like Cognition and Neurable are developing these innovative systems that combine EEG with other technologies like large language model processing, positional information, contextual information, and visual potentials, so that they can be used for diverse medical and non-medical applications. And we further heard from Anna Mikas about the incredible therapeutic potential of TMS and TDCS, which operate quite differently than EEG or than an implantable device. As diverse as these types of devices and products are, we heard every BCI researcher and company representative and investor speak about the importance of non-US born researchers, non-US collaborators, international supply chain, foreign manufacturing, global access to capital, and global access to market that makes commercialization viable and might help recoup some of the billions of dollars of investment that DoD, DARPA, NIH, and NINDS have poured into the development of this field over decades. Indeed, they even said that without multinational collaborations, their products wouldn't be possible. So this raises a further question for me. We may know why we are here, as Secretary Estevez teed up. We may know that BCI is here, but do we know sufficiently what BCI really are and what risks we're trying to control for? So if export regulation is appropriate, I think it becomes essential to define with care, potentially at least 4 further questions, though they should boil up from the group. But on my mind are, what types of realistic, foreseeable let me start over with that one. What types of realistic and foreseeable national security risk could arise related to BCI that would justify regulation? 1. 2, what types of BCI, since there are so many, and within that, what specific components of a BCI system could be involved in those specific risks? 3rd, what threshold of risk to the United States interests relative to harm to patients and to U.S. innovation would justify export control, particularly in light of the ongoing global development of BCI outside of the U.S. market anyway? And finally, if any regulation is appropriate, how can the U.S. collaborate with allied nations that are themselves active in BCI to create a harmonized framework? Thank you so much, everyone, today. Betty, everybody at Commerce for hosting us so beautifully, Matt for all of his tremendous work convening, and Karen, Violet, and everybody who participated today, thank you again, and hope to continue all of these conversations.
Thank you, Amanda, for that masterful summary and highlighting of those 4 considerations that I think we will need to continuously need to address through a collaborative community. And tomorrow we'll begin to have a little bit of a scoped conversation towards a different direction. So today was really raising awareness of the existing state of the art. And tomorrow we'll talk a little bit about ethical considerations around these technologies, applications that might be applications and dual use, and specifically a consideration of what dual use is and how is it conceptualized and operationalized. And then we'll close with risk mitigation strategies. So that's the general frame for tomorrow. We will start at the same time that we did today. And thank you for all your attention throughout the day. Thank you for our virtual members who have popped in throughout the day or have been here the whole time. And with that, I will pass it on to Betty to offer final closing comments.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank Karen for doing a fantastic job as a moderator today and keeping us all on track, you know, to adjourn at a timely, at what was expected. And so I would like to say that this has been such a very informative and enriching experience for the government, industry, academia, and patients. I think the presentations were insightful and enlightening. They lead us to have more questions and fruitful discussions for both the regulators and the industry. So the goal of this conference is, that has been mentioned before, is to generate informed decisions and also to learn about the latest developments and innovations for this promising field. So research and innovations are important for the US economy, as everyone knows, and the government is aware of this aspect for emerging technologies. So the federal government has to balance the promotion of the innovative technologies and the mitigation of risk from adverse use of these wonderful technologies. So I look forward to the second day of the conference where speakers will discuss dual use aspects of BCI and so on. So thank you everyone for attending the BCI, the first Commerce Emerging Technology BCI conference. And I'm so pleased with it, with such enthusiasm, and for everybody being present. So give yourself a big hand of applause. And I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow at the time. And so anyways, the meeting is adjourned, but for the people in the room, please stay after I have a short announcement to make for
everyone here.
Okay, thank you. So I think, thank you, virtual attendees. We are now stopping the recording, and you don't need to hear about any more of the housekeeping, I suppose, for